Chapter 632. This year, the second Princess Anna was still wearing a tiger cub leather case. Just like the third princess, Anchi, it was a brand new custom-made tiger cub. However, even though she was wearing a leather case, one could still see the joy in her footsteps. It was obvious that she had also obtained a satisfactory identity. Phew, Anna also sat down at the table. Then, she unzipped the head of the tiger cub leather case and draped it behind her neck like a hood. She raised her head slightly and breathed in the fresh air. Then, she asked curiously, "Dake, are you a vampire?" Dake opened his mouth and revealed his fangs. "You mean this?" "Hee hee." Anna turned her attention to the plate and began to eat in small bites. In the common lounge, which was filled with the aroma of food, all kinds of probing were present. The seniors and juniors gathered together. Everyone was still talking and laughing, but there was something else in their laughter. Remember the website, Vipkanshu. 6. The masquerade ball had not officially begun, but the students had already assumed their respective identities. The festive atmosphere gradually thickened. Dake cut the honey pancake on the plate into small portions, speared it with a fork, and put it into his mouth to chew carefully. The sweetness in his mouth made him squint slightly, and the corner of his eyes followed some slightly dazzling gazes. He gradually realized that he seemed to be targeted. Of course, this was not surprising. After all, he had always been so conspicuous. Just like a firefly in the dark, even if it unintentionally emitted light, it would still be noticed by everyone. Those gazes were not all malicious. Perhaps there were many people who were just curious about how he would perform in this masquerade ball. The rules of this event would undoubtedly deepen the interaction between the students. In terms of identity, everyone was a hunter and also a prey. After dinner, Dake did not leave immediately. The two little princesses suddenly invited him to take a look at the top floor. He thought about it for a moment, then agreed. They passed through the crowd, went up the stairs, and went all the way up. Not long after, the 5 of them arrived at the top floor of the Aristocrat House Tower. The 4 towers in the academy were all the same height. Each of them had 9 floors except for the basement. The first floor was the common lounge. Starting from the second floor, it was the dormitory for the first year to the 6th year. The 8th floor was the dual practice room, and the 9th floor was the observatory. Dake had not been to the observatory for a long time, ever since he set up the club classroom in the spiral clock tower. It was lunchtime, and there was no one at the observatory. A large telescope was placed in the middle of the observatory. Above the telescope was a transparent dome. Although it was not as tall as the clock tower, it was still possible to see part of the scenery outside the castle. As soon as Dake entered the observatory, Anna and Anchi, who had put on their hoods again, ran to the window and opened it. At some point, the cool autumn wind whistled in. Dake subconsciously tightened his collar and was attracted by the scenery outside the window. This is... He quickened his pace and walked to the window. He couldn't help but look out the window. He saw that the entire castle was surrounded by a huge barrier. Above the barrier, countless runes converged into a black dragon that roamed the outer surface of the barrier. If he didn't see Professor Mitya's pumpkin carriage in the middle, he would have been suspicious. This year's Halloween is really big. He couldn't help but sigh. If only the Crimson Star's reward was as big as this. The second Princess Anna, who was next to him, suddenly said, "That's right." Anchi, the third princess, also agreed. Dake didn't know why, but he suddenly felt dispirited. So he asked, "Did you ask me to come here just to see this?" "What else?" Anna was puzzled. Anchi suddenly jumped back a little, hugged her chest, and said, "Don't tell me you have other ideas?" Then her cheeks were suddenly pinched by 2 hands that stretched out from behind. Anna looked at the little bear that walked into the trap and was very happy. Luosi walked to the window and said, "It's actually very nice. Also, it has a Halloween vibe." That was all. The 5 boys and girls looked at the scenery in the observatory for a while, then went down the stairs and separated. Although such actions did not seem to have much meaning, the truth was that they did not have much meaning. However, the so-called memories were actually pieced together by these scenes, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Most of the beauty hidden within would leave one reminiscing. It was almost 6 o'clock in the evening. The professors, who had worked hard all day, all gathered in a spacious lounge. Under the command of the first person in charge of this Halloween event, Professor Lily Laplace, and the second person in charge, Professor Power Jones, these idle professors spent the entire day turning the entire castle into a huge stage filled with countless traps. And now, it was time for them to enjoy the fruits of their labor. The students danced on the stage, and the professors watched from outside the stage. Both sides could enjoy their own happiness. Lily nibbled on a melon seed and pointed at the mirror in front of her with great interest. Suddenly, ripples appeared on the surface of the mirror like water, and the bridge outside the tower of the aristocrat house appeared on it. Lily had scattered thousands of gremlins in the castle, and each gremlin could travel between the walls at will. Using a special method, she could connect with these gremlins and display the vision of any gremlin on the mirror. Not only that, she also shared this privilege with all the professors present, and each professor could freely choose the point of view they wanted. Of course, nominally, she obtained Professor Shi Erfu's permission on the grounds of protecting the students. Then, Professor Shi Erfu also asked Blood Maiden Ophelia Bullard for permission. And the other mother, Hephaestus Doragon, was naturally sitting in this lounge openly. Hephaestus was teaching Professor Nini how to connect with the gremlins. Although Professor Nini had some talent, she had never received formal education as a magister, so she had some difficulty in using magic power. Next to them, several arithmetic professors gathered together and also chose a point of view outside the tower of the aristocrat house. They all wanted to see what the cute little Dake could do. The answer sheet with 20 questions really piqued their interest. At this time, in the 4 towers, almost all the students had gathered in the common lounge. They had been waiting for this moment since they received the notification of the branch card this morning. Now that it was finally here, they were naturally very excited. The Halloween Masquerade Ball could be said to be the event of the year where it was the easiest to obtain a large number of credits and resources. Even those who had no interest in the Crimson Star and the Platinum Star were rubbing their hands and preparing to go all out. Moreover, this year's Masquerade Ball was so interesting. The students who had obtained the identities of vampire and werewolf were even more excited and couldn't wait. Of course, there were also students with other identities who were worried, but their mixed feelings of fear and excitement were also unique. Everyone was ready to go. In the tower of the aristocrat house, Dake stood at the top of the stairs with Deanna and Luo C beside him. He didn't ask Deanna and Luo C about their identities, but judging from their expressions, it shouldn't be a bad draw. Deanna kept stuffing milk candy into her mouth, trying her best to replenish her energy. Luo C was carefully observing the surroundings, his eyes calm and wise. The time was getting closer and closer to 6 o'clock. The conversation in the common lounge was getting quieter and quieter, and the sound of breathing was getting clearer and clearer. Dong. Finally, the hour hand pointed straight down. A loud bell rang from the spiral clock tower located in the center of the academy. The masquerade ball had officially begun. The doors of the 4 towers opened at the same time. The students who were near the gate all rushed out the moment the light shone in. "He's coming, he's coming." In the professor's lounge, Lily raised her eyebrows and quickly looked for Dake Dimming in the crowd that rushed out of the tower of the aristocrats. But Dake was standing at the top of the stairs and didn't move at all. Of course, she couldn't see him. The little fairy with dragonfly wings on her back flew out of a fairy tale, dragging a long trail of fluorescent light in the sky above the bridge. And the students below finally rushed onto the bridge. After crossing the bridge in front of the tower, they could enter the castle and begin their hunt for the ghosts tonight. An unexpected change happened at the moment when the first person was about to rush out of the bridge. From the center of the 4 bridges, a black spot appeared almost at the same time. In less than a second, this black spot expanded rapidly and covered the entire bridge in the blink of an eye. At that moment, in the vision of the students on the bridge disappeared. The ritualistic scream that opened the masquerade ball soared into the sky as if it was going to tear the night sky apart. The students who hadn't stepped onto the bridge suddenly stopped in their tracks. But the students behind didn't have time to stop in time and squeezed the students in front of them onto the bridge. Then, that portion of the students stepped on air, and their bodies went through the bridge, rapidly falling down. "Careful! No! Save me!" All kinds of screams were mixed in. The students who reacted quickly took out their magic cards and began to summon. And the students whose minds were filled with fear only saw darkness in front of their eyes and completely lost their train of thought. The bridge outside the tower led directly to the second floor of the castle, so the height between the tower and the ground was only the first floor. But every floor of the castle was extremely high. But this height also gave more time for the students to react. Some of the students quickly calmed down and immediately summoned their flying element magic guide sprites. Some students directly chanted incantations and cast levitation spells. And some students directly spread their wings on the bridge outside the tower of the House of Fools. The first thing Victoria did was to drag a student out of the tower and spread her wings in front of everyone's eyes. Her dark vampire bat wings attracted the disgust of many people, but that was all. In fact, Victoria's identity as a magic fairy had long been known. She quickly grabbed the panicked student, flapped her wings, and took him into the sky. Then she frowned and looked down. After a brief moment of panic, there were quite a number of students who reacted. And among the students who didn't set foot on the bridge, there were also many who helped. In the 4 towers, there was no exception. Even when the students in the towers came to their senses, all the students who fell from the bridge had already been rescued. They were either flying in the air or returning to the 2 sides. All of them were bewildered. Although they weren't hurt, this trap on the bridge, which was completely different from the usual style, still made them have doubts about this Halloween event. Why did the professors set up such a trap? Vidulia comforted the student who was holding on tightly to her while thinking quickly. Suddenly, she took out a magic card from her card bag and then cast the usual summoning spell. She summoned a round fat cat and threw it down. Meow! The fat cat suddenly let out a piercing scream. But the surrounding students looked at it with extreme indifference, making it feel the hypocrisy of the world. Bye! But when the fat cat was about to fall to the ground, a breeze suddenly came out and wrapped it in a stable posture to land on the ground. Sure enough! Victoria's eyebrows relaxed and she called the fat cat back. At that moment, there was a sudden vibration in her card bag. Beep! She took out the branch card from her card bag and activated it with a little doubt. Then, she saw the surprising words that appeared on the card surface: frowny face credits plus 200. Students who saved themselves and others received a certain amount of credits as a reward. And the amount was definitely not low. The prompt from the branch card instantly washed away the negative emotions of the students. The excitement that had just been washed off rose again, and some people even shouted, "Do it again." The black shadow on the bridge suddenly disappeared, and all 4 bridges returned to normal. After some people tried it, the students passed through the bridge and entered the castle one after another. But at this time, they were even more vigilant in their hearts. This year's masquerade ball was completely different from the past in all aspects. What a pity! In the professor's lounge, Lily looked at the mirror with a regretful expression. She thought she could see a little bit of Dake's panic, but she found that Dake did not go on the bridge at all. It was not until more than half of the students entered the castle that Dake, dressed as a vampire, walked out of the tower unhurriedly. Then, Lily heard a few arithmetic professors over there making a ruckus. "I told you it must be a vampire." The first-year Professor Murnau had a smug look on his face. This 70 or 80-year-old professor was glowing at this time. The other 2 arithmetic professors gritted their teeth and took out their branch cards to transfer the money. Lily slapped her forehead. This group of professors was betting on her heart. Then, she immediately rushed up and shouted, "What are you playing at? Count me in." Dake did not know that his vampire disguise had helped Professor Murnau earn a lot of credits. After crossing the bridge, he said to D. Anna and Luo C., "Then, let's part here. You saw the trap on the bridge before, so be careful." "Yes, yes, yes." D. Anna nodded vigorously. Then, she raised her arm and flexed her muscles. Of course, she was wearing long sleeves, so it was impossible to see. However, Dake was still amused by her. Then, he raised his head and his expression suddenly changed. He took on the identity of a vampire, and said, "The next time we meet, I won't be me." "Bring it on." Diana was fearless. "Then we'll be leaving. Good luck." Luo Si waved at Dake. Then, the three of them separated at the bridge. Dake looked back and saw that Diana and Luo Si were still walking together. He smiled silently. After turning a corner, he began to summon his magic guide fairy. First, the magician's secretary. 3 seconds later, a magic guidebook appeared in his hand. Then, he asked the magician's secretary to use the normal summoning spell to summon a 4-star magic guide fairy. First, the Diru beast. After giving this order, Dake used the normal summoning spell again. "In the name of Dake Dimming, come out, dream demon." Not long after, the dark green ghost appeared with a playful laugh. In this Halloween costume party, the dream demon was naturally the most suitable magic guide fairy. With it by his side, Dake did not have to worry about being ambushed by ghosts. "Meow!" The dream demon suddenly cried out. Then, it suddenly turned around and looked behind Dake. Doc reacted quickly and sprinted forward. He pulled some distance before turning around, only to see a ghostly figure sticking close to the wall. The ghostly figure was rapidly elongating downwards. After making a turn at a right angle, the ghostly figure stuck close to the floor and pounced at him. Whoosh! The cold wind from the nearby window made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The sudden appearance of this ghost gave him a fright. If he did not summon the dream demon at the beginning, he would not have felt the presence of this ghostly ghost at all. But since he already found it, dream demon, use fright. He immediately gave the order. "Demonic Mimi!" The dream demon cried out softly. It quickly caught up with the elongated ghost. Then, it suddenly slammed on the brakes and made an extremely cute face at Ghost. "Ah!" But this ghost was frightened by the face and screamed. The dream demon extended 2 claws from its body and grabbed the ghost when it was frightened. Ghosts usually had a certain degree of physical resistance. But of course, it was not immune to the dream demon's claws. After it was killed by the dream demon, it left a candy on the ground. "Is it toffee?" Dake bent down and picked up the candy. He vaguely remembered that during last year's Halloween event, the first ghost he encountered also dropped toffee. This kind of candy was made of brown sugar or molasses and cream. It was hard to chew, but if you get used to it, it was pretty good. He peeled off the candy wrapper and stuffed the toffee inside into his mouth. Then, he looked at the candy wrapper. The candy wrapper was engraved with fine lines. It was a one-time magic card with a time limit until midnight tonight. But if he looked carefully, he would find that this was slightly different from the one-time magic card made by Professor Ka-Zayer. It was obvious that it was not made by Professor Ka-Zayer. From these one-time magic cards, he could learn a lot. So, Dake put away the candy wrapper and then took out the school card to check. That ghost-type monster just now had given him 10 credits. There were a lot of changes in the rules of this year's masquerade party, including points for killing ghosts. Except for elite level and chief level ghosts. Ordinary ghosts were from 1 star to 9 star. Killing a 1-star ghost could give 10 credits. Killing a 2-star ghost could give 20 credits. Killing a 3-star ghost could give 30 credits. Killing a 4-star ghost could give 60 credits. Killing a 5-star ghost could give 80 credits. Killing a 6-star ghost could give 100 credits. Killing a 7-star ghost could give 200 credits. Killing an 8-star ghost could give 300 credits. Killing a 9-star ghost could give 400 credits. These ordinary ghosts were not very strong. Their magic power was similar to ordinary magic elves. There was no enhancement. Of course, there were some special individuals. They were between normal level and elite level. The credits obtained from killing them did not change, but they would drop better resources, at least not candy and snacks. As for elite level and chief level ghosts, killing them would naturally give more credits and better resource rewards. In addition, the lower grade protection was still in place. Except for elite level and chief level ghosts. Third-year students who killed 1-star ghosts had no credits. Fourth-year students who killed 2-star ghosts and below had no credits. Fifth-year students who killed 3-star ghosts and below had no credits. Sixth-year students who killed 4-star ghosts and below had no credits. Dake was now a second-year student, so he was not restricted. While absorbing the sugar from the toffee, he opened the resource map in the branch card. This was also a new rule added this year. At 6 o'clock sharp, the Academy distributed the resource map to every student's branch card. The resource points marked on everyone's resource map were different. And according to identity and grade, the scale and level of the resource points were also different. The Academy separated the grades to minimize the disruption of the seniors to the juniors. In short, before accumulating a certain amount of credits, most students would act according to this resource map. Dake was no exception. He opened the resource map, injected magic power, and made it float on the card surface. Then, he adjusted it to 3D mode. So, a transparent castle made of lines appeared in front of his eyes. In this castle, a total of 100 resource points were scattered in all directions. According to the rules, he only needed to conquer 20 of them to get extra credits. Let's start with the nearest one. 28+/127. I'm not sleeping anymore. I'll continue writing. I'm begging for monthly votes. I'm begging for blades. Chapter 633. The second-year students had experienced the simulated adventure test in the dual class, so they had a deeper understanding of this mode. Therefore, most of the second-year students were like Dake. As soon as they entered the castle, they immediately began to attack the resource points. If they were not fast enough, the resource points would be taken. The number of resource points in the castle was limited, and unlike the simulated adventure test, where each point could be collected 10 times, these resource points would disappear after being attacked once. Once they were taken, it meant that there would be one less resource point to choose from. The later it was, the less likely it was to gather 20 resource points. Therefore, in the early stages, it was best to attack as many resource points as possible. But this experience was not hard to analyze. Therefore, many of the upperclassmen immediately began to move after entering the castle. Fortunately, Dake's luck was not bad. When he found the first resource point, there was no one around. Remember, https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP, is it here? He raised his head and looked at the fairy flying over his head from time to time. He patted the little demon beast on his shoulder and ordered it to enter the classroom where the resource point was. This year's masquerade party was clearly more dangerous than last year. Even the way the ghosts appeared seemed to have evolved, making it impossible to guard against. As he walked, he frequently heard screams. It could be seen that many students had been frightened by the ghosts that appeared and disappeared mysteriously. Those ghosts might not be very strong, but they were really disgusting. Whoosh! The little demon beast circled around the classroom and flew back. After Dake confirmed that the little dream demon did not sense anything strange, he followed the map and walked into the classroom. Just as his right foot stepped into the door, bright red blood suddenly dripped down. Drip! An extremely clear sound rang in his ears. That drop of blood that came out of nowhere dripped to the ground. Then, a bubbling fountain of blood appeared under Dake's right foot. He quickly pulled his foot back, but it seemed to be stuck to the bottom of his foot and did not move at all. Dream demon! Dake immediately shouted, but no sound entered his ears. In the next moment, bright red blood completely dyed his vision red. Bingo! 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 In the professor's lounge, Li, who had been staring at the mirror, suddenly clenched his fists. A few of the mathematics professors also cheered. This is Bloodroom, right? Professor Bacon, who was in charge of the third-year mathematics class, asked. Professor Bacon looked to be in her 40s. She was the only female mathematics professor other than Li. She had short, flaxen hair that draped over her shoulders. Her brown eyes were slightly dark, and her skin was slightly pale. There were slight wrinkles on her forehead, deep eye sockets, and dark circles under her eyes. She often showed signs of fatigue. However, Professor Bacon was actually a very reliable and diligent professor. Li had always had a good relationship with her. 2 meters away, the professor of the second year's magical language class, Holder Bode, suddenly raised his head and said, "It's the blood room that I created." "What's wrong?" Professor Bode had naturally curly dark brown hair. The skin on his face was slightly dry, his nose protruded like an eagle's hook, and his eyes were slightly sinister. Although he didn't have a good reputation among the students, his knowledge was genuine. "It's nothing." Professor Bacon smiled at Professor Bode. Then, she turned her head and looked at the other mathematics professors. She whispered, "How many minutes?" The professors quickly stretched out their fingers. 3, 4, 5, and so on. Professor York, who taught the mathematics elective class, pondered for a moment and stretched out his hands. 9 minutes. Professor Lely blinked and said, "Then I guess it'll be cracked in 1 minute from now on." "Huh." A cold laugh suddenly came from 2 meters away. Although Professor Bode was very optimistic about Dake, he didn't think that his blood room would be cracked in 1 minute. After laughing, he quickly tapped on the mirror and connected with the fairy at the entrance of the blood room. The image of the blood room's entrance appeared in the mirror. At the entrance of the classroom, the magician's secretary was floating in the air. The usual chanting of the summoning spell had reached the end stage. In front of it, Dake Dimeng was still in the same position as when he stepped into the door. However, Dake's consciousness had already entered the blood room. The blood room, as the name suggested, was a room covered in blood. Blood seeped out from the corners of the walls and emitted a fishy smell. The blood that flowed to his feet quickly filled up and soaked his ankles in the blink of an eye. Dake held his breath and calmly observed. Thanks to the experience of the simulated adventure assessment, he didn't panic when he suddenly entered the blood room. The blood room in front of him was obviously an illusion. Cracking the illusion could activate the resource point and summon the elite-level ghosts. What he needed to consider was whether he would be ambushed by the ghost and fairy when he was trapped in the illusion. The ghost could steal credits. The fairy could seize resource points. If he was already followed by the ghost, he needed to crack the illusion within 3 minutes to avoid having his credits stolen. Of course, he hadn't obtained many credits in the event, so he didn't need to worry too much. What he really needed to worry about was whether the fairy would forcefully enter the illusion. If the fairy came to cause trouble, he had to crack the illusion before the fairy did. In short, it was a race of speed. He could only be fast, not slow. Dake looked around and slapped one of the walls. Although the thick blood flowing on the wall was disgusting, if he didn't touch it because of this, he could only be trapped here until he failed and was kicked out of the blood room. The magic reaction on the wall was very obvious. The key to cracking the illusion was undoubtedly on the wall. Bang! Sure enough, with a slap, the blood on the wall suddenly changed and quickly condensed into a large paragraph of extremely complicated magic language. However, with his understanding of magic language that far exceeded that of a second-year student, Dake saw through the mystery of this magic language at a glance. He immediately gathered magic at his fingertips and tried to modify the characters, re-editing this paragraph of magic language. After modifying the first character, there was no more blood flowing out from the cracks in the blood room. After modifying the second character, the blood that soaked up to his ankles suddenly receded. After modifying the third character, there was no more blood in the entire space. After modifying the fourth character, the entire paragraph of magic language suddenly lit up. The light illuminated the entire blood room and gradually swallowed one's vision. When he came back to his senses, Dake had already left the blood room. He stood firmly at the door and noticed a blood-red flower blooming on the podium. An elite-level monster drilled out of the flower bud, revealing a ferocious face. In that instant, a snow-white figure flashed past him like lightning. The Diru beast, that had just been summoned by the magician's secretary, waved its fists and jumped onto the podium in the blink of an eye, its claws bursting with white light. Cat, cat, fist! A shout rang out. The elite-level monster was smashed into pieces the moment it appeared. Meow. The Diru beast coldly snorted and stepped down, crushing the blood-red flower into a bloody pulp. Then, it picked out a seed from the bloody pulp and threw it to Dake. A seed. Dake took the seed and carefully examined it. The seed was about the size of a broad bean and there were vein-like patterns on the surface. When he approached it, he could smell a trace of blood. He thought for a bit and muttered, "Could it be the seed of a blood-sucking man-eating flower?" Because he had only seen it in books, he couldn't be sure and could only keep it for now. But if it really was the seed of a blood-sucking man-eating flower, he could cultivate a blood-sucking man-eating flower in the dormitory. After the blood-sucking man-eating flower was cultivated indoors, he could use a magic potion to get rid of its biting characteristic and feed it with blood to produce a blood drop fruit. If the blood that was fed was of a single species, the blood drop fruit would have some of the characteristics of that species. In the books that Dake had read, there were people who used this method to cultivate dragon blood fruit. After leaving the classroom, Dake confirmed that no one was following him and took out the branch card to check. As the resource map was unfolded again, he found that a circle had been drawn on the mark of this resource point. This should be a sign that the breakthrough has been completed. Dake couldn't help but smile. If it's this difficult, the 20 resource points should be quickly found and conquered. Little monster, Dilu beast, let's go. The exploration continued. In the professor's lounge, Professor Li's face was full of smiles. Dake solved the blood drop in a minute and successfully conquered the first resource point. She won the bet because Dake solved the blood drop in a minute. It was a win-win situation. This kid, I underestimated him. Professor Murnau shook his head. He thought that Dake would take at least 2 minutes to solve. He didn't expect the blood drop puzzle to be so simple. A puzzle that only needed to change 4 characters to solve. Who was he looking down on? Professor Murnau thought as he turned his head and glanced at Professor Bode. Professor Bode couldn't help but pull a long face. However, because his face had always been so gloomy, even if he pulled a long face, it didn't change. The other mathematics professors also revealed looks of sadness. Professor York, who was in his 40s, shook his head helplessly. The difficulty of solving the blood drop isn't simple, but he found the optimal solution in the first place. This should be thanks to his good mathematical thinking. That's right, agreed Professor Eric, who was in his 4th year. Professor Bacon, who was in his 3rd year, suggested, let's keep the credits for now. When the event is over, we'll settle it again. Lily raised her hand and smiled. No problem, I agree. Then we agree too, said the other professors. Professor Bacon suggested again, but we can't keep staring at Dake dimming. Let's change to someone else first. She reached out her hand and gently swiped across the mirror. The sprite's vision quickly changed. In the end, her heart stirred and she froze the image. These two. What are they doing? On the first floor of the castle, Anna and Enchi were hiding in a small classroom. The two looked at each other, each took out a magic card, and then quickly summoned. As 2 huge summoning arrays appeared under their feet, a black and a white ghost-type magic fairy appeared in the light of the summoning array. Possession Spirit, black. Possession Spirit, white. Looking at the 2 ghosts floating in the air, Anna and Enchi couldn't help but smile. Then, they reached out at the same time, and the black and white ghosts flew to them respectively. The moment their fingers touched, they simultaneously used their ultimate skill, possession. The next second, the 2 princesses, who were wearing bear skin and tiger skin, were suddenly swallowed by the black and white ghostly mist. When everything was calm, they transformed into 2 specters that were 2 meters tall. He. The 2 little princesses floated in the air and imitated ghostly screams. Then, they excitedly got out of the classroom and floated toward the nearby students. They had already participated in the Shang Malian Academy's Halloween event last year, so they knew that the ghosts on the first floor were very weak. It was basically a hunting ground exclusive to the first years, and the senior students wouldn't come to the first floor to compete with the first years. In other words, The first floor of the castle was their hunting ground. Professor Bacon, who saw the two little princesses from the mirror, couldn't help but ask, "Professor Melno, do you know what the identities of these two princesses are?" Professor Melno was a first-year mathematics professor, so he knew about the identities of the first-year students. He thought for a moment and said with a pained expression, "If I remember correctly, Anna is a ghost, and Enchi is a sprite. Two troublemakers." Professor Bacon was speechless. At this moment, she could already imagine the scene of Anna and Angie wearing the skin of ghosts and monsters, chasing the students of the same grade until they screamed and fled. What was even more terrifying was that Anna could steal credits from the first-year students in the process, and Enchi could seize their resource points. What happened after that was no different from Professor Bacon's guess. Until the two little princesses got carried away and went up to the third floor, and then they crashed into an iron plate. On the second floor of the castle, Aurora strolled alone in the corridor. Although she was easily shy in front of people, she was not timid in reality. Those ghosts that appeared and disappeared mysteriously could not scare her at all. If it wasn't for the fact that it was not suitable to use the power of giants in the academy, she could even tear ghosts with her hands and kick zombies with her feet. If she could control the sun-moon elves to fight against enemies, even second-tier ghosts would not be able to take advantage of her. However, she did not have any intention of doing that. Since she was in the School of Magic Engineering, she naturally had to use the power of magic engineering to solve the problem. She summoned 2 3-star magic engineering elves and then drove her familiar, the Icefire Hound, to explore the way and search for enemies. She hunted ordinary 1-star to 3-star ghosts while looking for resource points to conquer. Everything was smooth sailing along the way, and her identity happened to be the Jack-o'-lantern. As long as she activated the branch card and lit the lantern, she would be able to obtain an additional 5% credit reward during hunting. Aurora steadily harvested credits and resources. On the other side, Joey, who dressed herself as a princess, and John, who was forced by Joey to dress as a prince, gathered together only 5 minutes after the start of the masquerade party. The two siblings had agreed to act together a long time ago. Although the rules of this masquerade party had changed, they could not contact each other because they were locked in the tower, so they chose to meet up in the end. Based on the mutual trust between the siblings, they informed each other of their identities after meeting up. Joey's identity was a fairy, and John's identity was a werewolf. The two siblings looked at each other and hit it off. Most of the first-year students knew each other well. They knew very well that there were not many first-year students who were stronger than them. With the cooperation of the two, Joey could seize the resource points of the students in the same year, and John could snatch the credits through duels. They suddenly turned into a pair of thieves, thinking of stripping the few students who were usually an eyesore. Boom! But when the two were discussing the decision, a huge explosion suddenly came from not far away. Their expressions changed abruptly. Without hesitation, they turned their backs to the explosion and quickly left. The pure-blooded dark elf, Vivian Alvind, whose foot was grabbed by a zombie that suddenly crawled out from under the floor, lost control of her magic due to excessive shock. The terrifying explosion directly tore the zombie into pieces. She quickly squatted down and grabbed the necklace given to her by the Professor of Magic Introduction. The magic that went out of control finally calmed down. "Let's find a place with fewer people and leave." Vivian's face was pale. The necklace she wore would forcibly activate when her magic went out of control if it sensed the presence of someone nearby, preventing the magic from exploding. But this function would greatly consume the durability of the necklace and cause it to be damaged quickly. Therefore, she had to rely on herself in the end. After 2 months of hard work, her magic control had indeed improved, but it was still not enough. This masquerade ball might help her improve further. Vivian Alvin's identity was witch, but she was obviously not interested in divination. It wasn't too far away from Vivian. The Orc Prince, Spike Leon, was also quickly harvesting the credits of the ghosts. Spike had given up the idea of conquering the resource points from the beginning. Although he was unwilling to admit it, after repeatedly experiencing the shock of mathematics class, he had long realized that his brain power was limited. Rather than challenging those puzzles that would take a long time to solve, it was better to honestly hunt ghosts. His identity was Monster. But it was difficult for him to find a leader-level ghost in the first 3 levels. It was quite similar to Joey and John. Victoria and Phoenix also had a prior agreement. After the 2 magic elves separated from their respective students, they met at the agreed location. Although Victoria and Phoenix were both magic elves. But Victoria was a 7-star vampire's daughter, and Phoenix was only a 2-star when she transformed into the Phoenix form. However, the Phoenix relied on this immortal fire seed sure-kill skill to have an endless supply of magic power. In the case of controlling the magic elves to fight, she had more energy than Victoria. Soon after the 2 girls met, they went straight to the 3rd floor of the castle. The magic elves on the 1st and 2nd floors were not difficult for them. With the 2 of them working together, hunting on the 3rd floor was not a problem. The problem was that many second-year students also chose the 3rd floor. Victoria's identity was vampire. Phoenix's identity was immortal bird. The competition among the first-year students this year was probably more intense than in previous years. There were too many students who had the strength to compete for the Crimson Star. And among the second-year students, Dake Diming's strength was well-deserved to be first. But the new rule of resource points allowed other students to see the possibility of competing for first place in the grade. Whether it was AI Ma or Sarah, they were all firmly sprinting toward first place. Half an hour after the start of the game, the competition on the second-year ranking list was fierce. A few conspicuous names kept rotating at the top of the list, making the eyelids of the students who were paying attention to this list twitch. And Dake had already conquered a total of 5 resource points in this half an hour. If he continued at this rate, he would only need 2 hours to complete the 20 resource points. But that was obviously impossible. Half an hour later, on the 4th floor of the castle, Dake finally met his opponent when he found the 6th resource point with great difficulty. It was a student wearing a werewolf. No, it should be a kobold's leather suit. Originally, his face was completely covered by the leather suit, so Dake couldn't distinguish his identity. But his vampire costume was very eye-catching, and the other party recognized him at a glance. The second-year Dake Diming? The senior wearing the kobold's leather suit deliberately pretended to have a hoarse voice. Dake frowned slightly, but he still asked politely, "May I ask which senior you are?" "Haha." The kobold senior laughed dryly. Suddenly, he took out the branch card and showed his identity to Dake. "I'm sorry, I'm a vampire." "A vampire?" "A vampire, hidden under the kobold's skin." Interesting. Dake tapped the magic card in his hand, but he didn't show the branch card. He had witnessed the duel between the 2 students 10 minutes ago. When the werewolf or vampire activated the branch card and showed their identity to the selected target, the position of the branch card between the 2 would be the player's platform, and a duel similar to a simulated duel would unfold between the 2. Although this was the case, there was no limit to the location. The 2 duelists could move at will, and they didn't have to be limited to summoning magic spirits in the summoning area. In addition, at the beginning of the duel, the branch card would release a spherical barrier that surrounded the duelists in all directions. This spherical barrier was actually supported by the huge barrier outside the castle, and its energy limit was extremely high. But the barrier had the energy count of the damage. Once the damage exceeded 2,000 points, the duelist would be judged to have lost. That's right, only 2,000 points. Under normal circumstances, in a duel between senior students, 2,000 points of energy wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from the opponent. In other words, they couldn't be hit. Under the current rules, the duelists didn't have any room for error. Once they were hit, they would be judged to have lost. In addition to this rule adjustment, there would also be a 300-second countdown above the duel field. This meant that a duel would last at most 5 minutes. After 300 seconds, the winner would be determined by the damage received. If the damage received was the same, it would be a draw. Of course, the premise of these rules was that the duel between the 2 parties could be established. Dake walked forward as if nothing had happened while the other party was stunned. According to the map, the 6th resource point was in a washroom. The entrance to the washroom was between the 2 of them. Whoever went in first would have the upper hand. Students who weren't fairy could only wait for the other party to fail before going in. After Dake moved, the Kobold Senior finally figured it out. Are you a werewolf, vampire, or immortal bird? What do you think? Dake squinted his eyes. Then, when he was only 3 meters away from the door, he gathered energy under his feet and instantly sped up. However, at this moment, the dog-headed senior suddenly raised the magic card in his hand. The magic card had already been activated. Pale blue ripples of ice shot out from the wall and froze the entire wall in the blink of an eye. The Academy's rules forbade students from attacking students outside of the duel, but there was no rule against using other methods. The Kobold Senior let out a cold laugh and slowly walked towards the door. Junior Dake Dimming, you're too naive. But then, he saw Dake Dimming, who had run to the door, raise his fist towards the ice wall that sealed the door, and then instantly punched. Boom! That thick ice wall was actually smashed into smithereens by his punch. The Kobold Senior's jaw almost fell off. Doc waved his hand at the senior and said with a smile, "I'll go in first, senior." Then, he stepped into the washroom. What kind of monster is this? The Kobold Senior stared at the door of the washroom with his eyes wide open. After a while, he turned around and left. Since the person who entered this resource point was Dake, there was no point in staying here. He didn't think that Dake would fail. 5 minutes later, Dake walked out of the washroom. There was an icy blue shell in his hand. It was the ocean's ice shell. As long as magic power was injected into it, it would shoot out a beam of ice light from the mouth of the shell. Although it wasn't very powerful, it was more than enough to chill drinks. Dake put away the shell and opened the school card to continue to choose the 7th resource point. However, after taking 2 steps, he suddenly turned around and shouted, "Who is it?" Not far behind him, there was the sound of running footsteps, but it gradually faded away. "Is it a ghost?" Dake said in a low voice. After a student entered the resource point, the ghost's tracking time would not be counted. If a ghost wanted to complete the tracking task, the easiest way was to get close to a werewolf or a vampire when they were dueling. Generally, in an intense duel, it was very difficult for the duelist to discover that others were following them. This led to the duelist having 5% of their credits stolen by the ghost during the duel. Therefore, during the duel, one had to be on guard against the ghost spying. Dake continued forward. He didn't bring too many magic guide spirits with him. Apart from the magic guide secretary, Little Devil Beast, and Diru Beast that he summoned at the beginning, there was only Fairy Ibu and Single Scabbard. The Diru Beast, with the Holy Sword, was enough to deal with most of the ordinary ghosts. The Holy Sword's ability to restrain the dark element was also gradually revealed. Let me see, the closest resource point this time is. Forget it, let's go up to the 1st floor. After searching for a while, Dake clearly found that resource points also had levels. The higher the level of the resource point, the harder the puzzle needed to be solved, and the stronger the ghosts summoned after solving the puzzle. Similarly, the more credits and resources obtained after killing the ghosts, the better. He walked all the way from the 2nd floor to the 4th floor, and now he was prepared to go to the 5th floor to take a look. The ghosts on the 5th floor were around 5-star to 6-star. Occasionally, there would be stronger ghosts, but they were very rare. Last year, his strength wasn't enough to support him to explore the 5th floor. But this year he was very different. After a few minutes, Dake found the stairs leading to the 5th floor. But when he approached the stairs, he suddenly heard people shouting at each other nearby, and he couldn't help but be curious. He called for the magic guide spirits to lighten their footsteps and quickly approached. As the sound gradually became clearer, he recognized the unique voice belonging to Deanna. "So it's Deanna, no wonder I'm always worried." Dake quickened his pace and didn't hide his footsteps anymore. He directly walked out from the corner and saw Deanna dueling with a squid. Is Deanna a werewolf or a vampire? The moment this thought appeared, Dake suddenly noticed Luo-C outside the dueling area. "Who is it?" Luo-C suddenly turned her head, and the magic guide spirits at her feet shot out like shuttles. The Dilu beast quickly stepped forward and blocked the rabbit with a sharp horn on its head. "Tianyuan rabbit, come back quickly," Luo Si hurriedly called out. After the rabbit's attack failed, it quickly returned. Dake looked at the scene in front of him with great interest. Anna was dueling with someone, and Luo Si was openly watching from the side. Then, what was Luo Si's identity? "She can't be a ghost, right?" Dake muttered in a low voice. Although Anna was acting as a ghost, her companion was the real ghost. Wouldn't that be dramatic? But if that was the case, how miserable would the person who was dueling with Anna be? But speaking of which, why does that squid leather suit look so familiar? A series of questions appeared in Dake's mind, and he looked at the unknown person wearing the squid leather suit. Then, he saw this unknown person in anger summon a very familiar magic guide spirit, Three-Eyed Squid. "It's really him." Dake approached Luo Si and asked, "What's going on?" Luo Si whispered, "It's okay, Anna took the initiative to duel with someone." Dake replied, "Yes." Dake suddenly realized that from the beginning, he didn't seem to think that Anna was the one being dueled. Luo Si said again, "Hasn't it been more than half an hour? Anna has been looking for someone to duel with. Just now, when she was exploring a resource point, she failed to solve a riddle. Then, that squid suddenly fell from above." Above? Dake couldn't help but raise his head. But the ceiling was tight, and there was no cave. However, after experiencing the incident on the bridge, he knew that there was a trap that could make people fall directly through the floor. "Isn't that too unlucky?" Dake couldn't help but open his mouth, and his cold and handsome image of a vampire was almost shattered. Luo Si was still explaining, he didn't look very strong, so Anna tried to test the water with him, and then this happened. Dake. C. Keat Hephaestus. 3rd grade, male. The former squid of the Marine Order. Current member of the Marine Biology Research Department. By the way, the head of the Marine Biology Research Department was White Gouda. Dake had some understanding of C. Keat's strength. C. Keat's strength had improved since she was able to fight Anna back and forth. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that Anna was holding back. After all, the masquerade party had just started. If she used all her strength now, wouldn't she be lying flat later? As for C. Keat, she probably didn't hold back. It had been less than 2 minutes since Dake arrived, and C. Keat was already at a disadvantage. Since the shield that measured health was on the duelist's body, they could dodge the opponent's attacks by running. But because of this, C. Keat was in a very difficult situation. Another half a minute passed. C. Keat was finally knocked down by Anna's magic fairy. Dake couldn't understand why C. Keat chose such a heavy squid leather cover. I lost. After being knocked down, C. Keat lay on the ground like a squid that had been dried up in the sun. He looked at the ceiling helplessly. The energy of the barrier on his body had exceeded 2,000 points. The duel was over. Yay! Diana, on the other hand, looked excited. However, she didn't look at her school card at all. It was obvious that she didn't care about the credits that she would get after winning the duel. Maybe she didn't even think about it. But at this time, Luo Si picked up his school card and winked at Dake. His meaning was clear without words. It really is a ghost. Dake could almost imagine Scott's screams when he checked his credits later. He took pleasure in Rose's misfortune and said, "Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. I don't want to be your next target." Luo Si pursed his lips, but the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. He scratched Dake and said, "I'll find you when it's almost over." Dake's mouth twitched, and he quickly turned around. But before he could escape, 2 people came out from the other side of the tunnel. It was White and Luo Boat. 31/127. Good evening. I successfully finished typing 9,000 words at midnight. Including the overnight coding, it's a total of 15,000 words. Good night, go to sleep. When you wake up, you'll be a living person. There are only a few days left until December. Don't hold on to your monthly votes. Vote, 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 vote. Brothers and sisters who love books, please open an automatic subscription, please. Degree, 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 degree. Chapter 634. The normal ghosts on the 4th floor of the castle were around 4 or 5 stars. They wouldn't exceed the 2nd tier. Therefore, the best of the second years had the ability to explore the 4th floor. Considering the fact that a 4-star ghost provided twice as many credits as a 3-star ghost, most of the top students would give it a try. If they could hold their ground on the 4th floor, they would be able to obtain even more credits. Every 4-star monster could provide 60 credits, which was equivalent to the reward of 6 classes. As long as they thought of this, the students seemed to be filled with endless motivation. Anna and Luo C were the same. White and Luo Boat were the same. Therefore, it wasn't a coincidence that they met at the staircase. White and Luo Boat also heard the commotion and came over. Even though they came a bit late and didn't see the duel between Anna and C Keat, the situation was clear at a glance. Website: https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP White paused, then quickly ran to C Keat's side and helped him up. C Keat, are you okay? I'm fine. C Keat sighed. I'm just a bit unlucky. That's really bad luck. White quietly looked at the people present and whispered, Is Anna a werewolf or a vampire? C Keat subconsciously said, How would I know? Oh, I can find out. His heart suddenly twitched, and he quickly took out his school card to check his credits. In that instant, his originally rather dejected expression was completely pulled down. White saw that his expression wasn't right, and quickly asked, What's wrong? C Keat's lips trembled as he spoke. It's gone. I lost 1/4 of my credits. White's eyelids twitched. She glanced at Anna, Luo C, and Dake. She immediately stood up and said, Since Senior is fine, Luo Boat and I will leave first. Time for the masquerade ball is very precious. Every minute counts. We have to hurry. Senior, you have to work hard too. Let's do it. Before C Keat could finish her sentence, he took a few steps back and pulled the Luo Boat into a yo-yo. Luo Boat was dumbfounded. He shouted as he ran, Why are you running, White? White said in a low voice, Why do you ask so many questions? Just run. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had already run far away. But suddenly, a scream rang out. White felt the ground beneath her feet disappear, and her entire body plummeted from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor. He steadied his body in the air and looked up at the rapidly disappearing black hole on the floor with a stupefied expression. I have to climb up from the 3rd floor again. Luo Boat, who hadn't stepped into the trap, also had a pained expression on his face. Without White, it would be very difficult for him to move freely on the 4th floor. While he was thinking, he suddenly felt a tingling sensation behind his shoulder. Then, a chilly wind brushed against the back of his neck, and he heard a low moaning sound. He shuddered violently and slowly turned around, only to see a rotten face. Luo Boat ran like crazy. White's and Luo Boat's screams made C Keat's expression change. He hurriedly got up and chased after them, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Dake and the other two didn't pay any attention to him. They probably stepped into some kind of trap? Dake thought as he said to Anna and Luo C, I'm going up to the 5th floor, you guys be careful. No problem. Diana raised her head and looked at him, patting her chest loudly. Dake smiled and turned around to leave. When he returned to the stairs, he thought for a bit and then stepped onto the stairs. Normally speaking, the stairs were a relatively safe place. Ghosts that were limited to the floor would rarely go near the stairs. Although there were many unexpected traps in today's masquerade party, even if there was a black hole trap in the stairs, there shouldn't be any meaning to it, right? Dake put a milk candy in his mouth and called for the magic guide fairies to speed up. But when he passed through the corner of the stairs, he suddenly had a very slight feeling, as if he had passed through something. His slightly relaxed nerves were instantly stretched to the limit. The Diru beast and fairy Ibu felt something was wrong and immediately stopped. HM? The little demon beast made a puzzled sound. Demon Mimi? The little dream demon turned in a circle in the air and tilted her head. Dake knit his brows and carefully looked around, but he didn't find anything strange. He couldn't help but hesitate. Did you find anything? The little demon beast and the Diru beast looked around for a bit and then shook their heads. Then let's continue. Dake took a deep breath. Between going back and going forward, he chose the latter. Thus, he brought the magic guide fairies up and slowly went up the stairs. We're on the 5th floor. The strength of the ghosts this year was clearly higher than last year. Last year, they could still see a group of 3-star ghosts on the 5th floor. This year, they rarely saw 3-star ghosts on the 4th floor. Perhaps a group of 5-star ghosts would appear on the 5th floor. Once a group of ghosts appeared, the threat level would increase by at least 1 star. Because of this, among the 3rd years, many students only moved to the 4th floor and didn't dare to rashly set foot on the 5th floor. The professors used this method to divide the student body. The students that could stay on the 5th floor and above were either in a stable group, solo top students, or senior students. Dake took out his school card and prepared to choose a nearby resource point to explore according to the resource map. Because he was a 2nd year, among the 100 resource points he was allocated, only a few of them were in the higher levels. His choice was actually quite limited. And from here on out, he would need to compete with the senior students. The difficulty would undoubtedly be higher. But because of this, it was more challenging. Furthermore, the rewards he could obtain would definitely be much greater. Meow. The little dream demon's cry suddenly became sharp. The Diru beast suddenly pricked up its ears and said in a low voice, "It's coming." Dake immediately put away his school card and prepared to deal with the incoming ghosts. Looks like I'm quite popular. There are ghosts coming to greet me as soon as I come up. He shortened his cane and stuck it in his waist. Then, he summoned the sickle dagger. Although he wasn't prepared to personally fight the enemy, if he encountered a situation where he had no choice, he would still make a move. Then, only 2 breaths of time passed. There was a large number of dense footsteps approaching from afar. Dake sensed that there was a group of ghosts and immediately prepared to summon the demon fox. Not long after, the first ghost flew out from the corridor on the left. It was a fat zombie with its scalp peeled off, revealing its bloody muscles and skull. Dake's scalp immediately went numb. If it was Professor Ka-Zayer, he definitely wouldn't refine a ghost like this. He would at least sew up the scalp. Roar. The zombie was more than 2 meters tall. Its head was so big that it was deformed. Its stomach was also incomparably huge, and its appearance was incomparably ugly. However, its 4 limbs were thick and long. The muscles on its arms bulged, and even its skin cracked. Green blood flowed out from it from time to time. Dake's heart trembled. He felt that something bad was going to happen. The zombie in front of him was very obvious. It was the Ghost Mother Zombie of the 2nd tier. Ghost Mother Zombie's star level was between 4 and 6 stars. It belonged to the undying species and was of the dark element. It was within the range of the Holy Sword. However, they were usually ghosts that moved alone. They shouldn't appear in groups. Moreover, the Ghost Mother Zombie in front of him was clearly emitting a powerful 6-star aura. There are already 6-star ghosts appearing in groups on the 5th floor? This was obviously impossible. Dake couldn't help but turn around to look at the stairs. He immediately realized what was going on. He had directly jumped from the 4th floor to the 6th floor, or even higher. Dilu Beast. However, whether this was the 5th floor or the 6th floor, the time needed to do it would not change. The Dilu Beast instantly rushed out. Its running speed was extremely fast. When it leaped out, it instantly pulled out its sword. The light of the Holy Sword erupted from the single sword scabbard and covered its entire body. Its eyes flashed with excitement. In the blink of an eye, it had already approached the Ghost Mother. Attack its stomach. Dake immediately gave the order. The Dilu Beast's eyes flashed. It suddenly exerted strength on its legs. Its petite and gentle body was filled with power. It flew into the air and raised the long sword in its hand. Then, it violently slashed down. Hiss! It didn't attack the stomach, but from top to bottom, including the stomach, the zombie's body was split into two halves. Then, without waiting for Dake's order, it continued to rush out and faced the ghost mother that was rushing out from the corridor. It has 6 stars, and its defense is around 2,500. It has low magic power, which means that it has a little more than 2,000 magic power. Its strength should be its attack, but its speed isn't fast. The biggest threat is the Japanese zombie, hiding in its stomach. If the ghost mother isn't killed before it dies, it will face the terrifying corpse explosion. The Dilu beast's attack power is 1900. Holy Ring adds 500, Holy Sword adds 1200, and its control over the dark attribute increases by 50%. It only needs 1 sword to kill a ghost mother. In less than 10 minutes, the more than 26-star ghosts, Ghost Mother, were completely killed by the 4-star magic guide fairy, Dilu Beast. A 6-star ghost's academic credits is 120. 20 of them is 2,400. As expected of the first year's academic credit harvest day, Dake couldn't help but reveal a happy expression. He motioned for the little demon beast to pick up the candy that had scattered on the ground. In last year's Halloween event, he only harvested 5,000 academic credits, but this year, he easily broke last year's record. Although this was related to his growth in strength this year, the bigger reason was that the high-star ghosts were more valuable. However, the number of these one-off ghosts was limited after all, and it was impossible to harvest them endlessly. According to last year's experience, the number of ghosts would greatly decrease around 9 o'clock. Moreover, the increase in the value of the ghosts would definitely make the senior students more diligent. Perhaps it would be difficult to find such a group of ghosts around 8 o'clock. At that time, looking for resource points and hidden bosses that hadn't been broken through would become the main direction of the students. Of course, the carnival of all kinds of identities would also begin. Dake took out his school card again and opened the resource map. Then, he carefully observed the surrounding terrain, trying to find his location from the map. It took him nearly 5 minutes just to do that. After he roughly determined his location, he began to look for the nearest resource point. The moment he accurately found the resource point, he was finally sure that he had indeed entered the 6th floor of the castle. The 6th floor, it's easier than I thought, Dark said in a low voice and stepped into the warehouse where the resource point was located. He didn't enter an illusion. He paused for a moment and continued to enter. This warehouse was piled up with a large number of stacked tables and chairs. The tables and chairs were covered in dust, and there was a half-skinned mannequin in the corner. He glanced at the mannequin and couldn't help but frown. I didn't trigger any mechanism. The puzzles of resource points were generally divided into 2 types. One type was the puzzles that would be triggered when entering with the school card. The other type was the type that wouldn't be triggered and needed to be found and triggered by oneself. For the second type of puzzles, finding itself was part of the puzzle. In this case, what needed to be considered was whether the resource point had been broken through in advance. Dake looked around and confirmed that there were only his footprints on the dusty ground before he began to search. The most suspicious thing in this warehouse is without a doubt that mannequin, but it could also be a smoke screen. Perhaps the tables and chairs everywhere are the key? Dake thought for a moment and had the little devil and dream demons stand guard outside, while he had the Fairy Ibu and the Dilu Beast enter the warehouse to help. Fairy Ibu, take out the mannequin in the corner. Carrot Omega Carrot. Fairy Ibu immediately stretched out her ribbon and forcefully pulled out the mannequin in the corner. Dake lowered his head and looked for a moment before shaking his head. There's no magic aura. Then he had the Dilu Beast move the mannequin out of the warehouse and had Fairy Ibu move the tables and chairs out of the warehouse one by one. Using this almost violent method, he quickly moved the majority of the tables and chairs out, and then he found a chair that couldn't be moved. Looking at the chair that seemed to be welded to the ground, Dake couldn't help but smile. Dilu Beast, sit up and take a look. The Dilu Beast nodded and hugged the single sword scabbard. He jumped onto the chair and then sat down. It was also at that moment that the warehouse began to shake. "It's here." Dake's eyes suddenly lit up. This type of resource point would summon elite-level monsters after finding the mechanism and triggering it. Compared to the resource points that focused on solving puzzles, this type of resource point was clearly more focused on fighting. Killing this monster would give you credits and resources as a reward. I wonder how many credits the resource point on the 6th floor of the castle will reward? Dake quickly retreated to the door, waiting for the elite-level monsters to appear. Suddenly, there was a repulsive force on the chair, and the Dilu beast that was sitting on it was suddenly sent flying. The Dilu beast twisted its body in the air, adjusting its posture, and nimbly landed on the ground. But when it turned around, its eyes were filled with killing intent. On the chair, a translucent ghost silently appeared. That ghost was wearing battle armor, holding a halberd, and had a golden crown on its head. It looked like a general, but also like a king. Dake was unable to call out its specific name. For the time being, he called it the Ghost King. This Ghost King was clearly a ghost-type undying species. Looking at its aura, it did not seem to have the dark attribute. This was not good news. "Dilu beast, can you do it?" Dake asked. The Dilu beast raised its eyebrows and said without hesitation, "Of course." Dake nodded slightly. "Then I'll leave it to you." After being replenished by the energy medicine, the Dilu beast that was at its peak state pressed its hand on the hilt of its sword and charged forward. The size of this warehouse was limited, so its speed would be limited. But the opponent's body was bigger, and it was using a long weapon, so it would be limited even more. A sword light flashed, and the Dilu beast had already unsheathed its sword. After the enhancement, its attack power reached up to 3,600 points, giving it the ability to break through the defense of a 6-star monster. As long as it could break through the defense, it had the confidence to rely on its speed and skill to break through the enemy. Meow! After a shout, the tip of the single sword scabbard was already in front of the Ghost King's neck. It avoided the body that was wearing battle armor, and attacked the neck that had a weaker defense, piercing through its throat. The Dilu beast's goal was obvious. However, under the stimulation of the sword, the Ghost King suddenly opened its eyes, and a dazzling golden light was emitted from its eyes. Meow! The Dilu beast instantly felt a strong sense of danger, but the arrogance in its heart did not allow it to withdraw its sword to block. Instead, it continued to stab forward. Then, its body was completely exposed to the golden light. Puchi! The holy sword stabbed into the half-real, half-illusory body. However, when it wanted to continue, the Dilu beast's body was locked by the golden light. The golden light dissipated slightly, revealing golden chains that tightly bound his wrists, ankles, and body. They stretched out in all directions. Dilu beast, cat's eye. While it was slightly panicking, the Dilu beast suddenly heard Dake's command, and its eyes opened wide. A spinning red wheel appeared in its eyes, and it suddenly shot out. The Ghost King was using its killing move, and it immediately locked eyes with the Dilu beast's cat's eye. In that instant, it suddenly felt dizzy. Although it was not successfully confused, it loosened its control over the golden chains. Cat's fist. Dake issued another command. The Dilu beast's heart moved. It clenched its left claw, and a white light bloomed. However, it did not attack, and instead used the energy to grab the golden chains, tearing them apart. Fairy Ibu, bewitching voice. Meow Heart Suit, a cute cry sounded at this moment. Fairy Ibu, who had unknowingly put on the moon pendant, softly chanted a bewitching song. The Dilu beast immediately calmed down. Its right hand loosened, and its left hand grabbed the single sword scabbard. Then, it turned its wrist, and the chains on its body were quickly shattered. After landing, it did not avoid the Ghost King's calf at all. The sound of silk ripping could be heard as his calf was cut open. Roar! The Ghost King immediately let out a terrifying howl. The halberd in its hand fiercely stomped, causing the warehouse to shake, and a ring of intense golden light burst out. That golden light formed a ring, and it actually pushed the Dilu beast to the wall. However, Fairy Ibu's bewitching voice did not stop. The ghost light that had just broken free fell into the bewitching state once again. The Dilu beast slid down from the wall, and once again gripped the single sword scabbard. The killing intent in its eyes became even stronger. 7 stars. Dake said in a low voice. His tone revealed a hint of seriousness. This Ghost King was at least 7 stars. After being strengthened, its mana was several times higher than normal. Under normal circumstances, if both sides did not use their killing moves, the Dilu beast might not be its opponent. Unfortunately, a mage was never a one-on-one job. Luckily it's not the Ghost Queen. Dake's lips curled up, and he ordered the Dilu beast to attack again. When the Dilu beast held the single sword scabbard, and completely pierced through the Ghost King's neck, it finally woke up from the bewitching state. However, the Dilu beast turned its wrist and used all its strength to instantly behead it. The Ghost King's head fell, but its body that was sitting on the chair was still straight. It did not die. However, it had lost its head. The Dilu beast slightly retreated. Fairy Ibu stopped her singing. The headless body of the Ghost King slowly stood up from the chair. The halberd in its hand was already wrapped in golden light. The battle entered the second round. 3 minutes later, the Ghost King that had lost its head was finally killed by the Dilu beast. The red flush on the Dilu beast's face that represented excitement gradually disappeared. The Ghost King's body disappeared in the scattered light. On the chair, the gift box of the one-time magic conducting card appeared. Dake walked into the room, opened the gift box, and saw a translucent pearl. Soul pearl? Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he carefully examined it. This soul pearl was shrouded in gray fog, and it emitted an extremely pure ghost-type energy aura. Although it did not have any special effects, it was because of this that it became an extremely good core material for refining a ghost-type magic conducting fairy. Dake could not help but turn his head to look outside the door. Although the little dream demon had received the order to guard, it was currently peeping inside mischievously. When it noticed Dake's gaze, it immediately turned around and pretended to be guarding seriously. Dake's face revealed a helpless smile, and then he put away the soul pearl. The experience of successfully refining the dream demon made him realize that the compatibility between bliss and ghost type was extremely high. Using this high-purity soul pearl, together with the soul remnant of the soul sucker that he obtained from the underground city, he might be able to refine a high-star ghost-type magic conducting fairy. Although the method of evolving from a low star to a high star was more convenient to summon, a high-star ghost-type magic conducting fairy could not be restricted and had the advantage of being able to exist for a long time. This was very important in actual battles. It was impossible for a magus to completely enclose his stage in a magus duel. Actual battles were still important. For the ghost type, using the fruit of the foxgrass, I might be able to refine a pink ghost-type magic conducting fairy that originated from a Pokémon. After tonight, I'll think about it carefully. After Dake put away the soul pearl, he bent down and picked up the Dilu beast while it was struggling. He patted its head and asked, "Are you tired?" The Dilu beast turned its head and said without hesitation, "Not tired." Dake said helplessly, "Let's rest for a while." Dilu beast, "No need." Dake said, "Rest for an hour until 8 o'clock. The Dilu beast frowned and thought for a while, then nodded slightly. "Okay." Dark put it down and then picked out a 1-star magic guide sprite from his card pack, Fruit Gnawing Bug. "In the name of Dake Dimeng, I summon Fruit Gnawing Bug." When the Fruit Gnawing Bug was summoned, he picked it up and said, "I'll have to trouble you to be the sacrifice." The Fruit Gnawing Bug shook and said, "Okay." Dake continued to summon. Then, with the 4-star Dilu beast and the 1-star Fruit Gnawing Bug as the sacrifice, I'll summon Lion Beast. As the huge sacrificial summoning array opened up in the warehouse, the Dilu beast that had been fighting until now and the Fruit Gnawing Bug that had just been summoned turned into light and disappeared. Then, the Lion Beast that was in its peak state appeared from the sacrificial summoning array. "Take it." Dake threw the single sword scabbard to it and smiled, I'll leave the rest to you." The lion beast knelt down on one knee and nodded, "Understood." The 5-star lion beast had more comprehensive stats than the Dilu beast. After equipping the single sword scabbard, its attack was also higher than the Dilu beast. It could raise its attack to 3,800 points. If the target was a normal dark-type monster, even if it was a 6-star one, it could be easily killed. But if it was a spectre-type or other type monster that wasn't a fiend, it would be more difficult. Considering the issue of efficiency, if he encountered a group of monsters, Dake might choose to temporarily avoid them. He thought about how to stand firm on the 6th floor and walked out of the warehouse. At this moment, there were still 6 magic guide fairies by his side. The single sword scabbard had always been in the form of a weapon. The little fiend, dream demon, magic guide secretary, and Fairy Ivan hadn't done much before, so there was no need to change them. On this kind of stage, Fairy Ivan's charming body could be used very well. Together with her bewitching voice, she could even charm a group of male monsters. Every time he saw a group of males being charmed and losing their ability to fight, Dake couldn't help but sigh, "Femme fatale." Let's go to the 8th resource point. Dake opened the resource map and carefully selected. After confirming his target, he quickly moved forward. About 3 minutes later, when he was about to reach the 8th resource point, the school card in his hand suddenly vibrated. This notification instantly alerted him. He didn't hesitate to infuse his magic power to check his credits. The final result was as expected. 5% less. It was stolen by the ghost. He suddenly turned around to check, but since the other party was able to silently follow him for 3 minutes without being discovered, it was impossible to see with the naked eye. Fury +1. Although this is part of the game, it's still so infuriating. At this moment, Dake finally experienced a fifth of C. Keat's pain. But of course, he couldn't admit defeat like C. Keat. Almost without hesitation, he took out the spider pearl from his card pack and summoned it on the spot. "In the name of Dake Dim-ing, I summon the spider pearl." 3 seconds later, a white pearl appeared on the surface of the spider pearl card. On top of the pearl, there was a transparent shadow of a spider, emitting a sparkling light. Dake raised the pearl, infused it with magic power, and whispered, "Spider sense." His senses became abnormally sharp, and the white pearl in his hand suddenly emitted a bright white light. The white light was like a spider's web that shot in all directions, penetrating the walls without any resistance and spreading quickly. He closed his eyes on the spot, and a huge spider web appeared in his mind. The light that formed the spider web was connected to his senses, and it clearly reflected all kinds of subtle reactions. Found it! Dake's heart skipped a beat, and a faint shadow of a human figure appeared in the huge spider web. He didn't open his eyes immediately, but he controlled the light to gather in a certain direction. When he summoned the spider pearl, the other magical fairies except the dream demon noticed that someone was following them. When they saw the light gathering, the lion beast that was in charge of attacking immediately charged in the direction of the light gathering. The ghost's ability could only be activated within 10 meters, and during the activation process, it couldn't be more than 10 meters away. Therefore, if the ghost wanted to successfully steal, it would usually be closer. Under normal circumstances, this would be very difficult to do. However, the layout of the castle was complicated, and ghosts or traps would suddenly appear along the way. Therefore, if one chose the right time to attack, there was still a chance to complete the steal. However, the ghost in front of him had been following Dake ever since he came out of the warehouse. During this process, Dake didn't encounter any ghosts, so he wasn't distracted at all. He was obviously very good at hiding. However, his biggest mistake was not running away immediately after successfully steal. The distance of less than 10 meters was only a few steps for the lion beast. Facing the lion beast's pressure and the rapidly approaching sword, the ghost couldn't continue hiding. Hiss! Sure enough, there was something rushing out from the empty void. The lion beast frowned, and the holy sword in its hand mercilessly slashed out. Hiss! This time, the snake's hiss was even clearer. The single scabbardous blade was bitten by a python that gradually appeared out of thin air. The ghost, who was wrapped around by the python's body, gradually revealed himself. Most invisibility abilities couldn't be maintained under strong external stimulation. Although the ghost's invisibility ability was very strong, it didn't seem to be an exception. Dake finally saw the thief who stole his credits. Since the thief was wearing a makeup suit and not a school uniform, Dake couldn't recognize the ghost's year and school. However, the leather suit he was wearing was very unique, and Dake had a vague impression of it. "Is it a senior from the Noble Academy?" Dake asked directly. "How troublesome." The ghost sighed and pushed away the python that was wrapped around his body. The snake-like magic elf had delicate snow-white snake scales. From head to toe, except for its red eyes and snake tongue, everything else was white. The ghost himself was wearing the same white snake-scale leather suit, and even his head was stuffed inside. It seemed like he was acting as a naga. This kind of monster's appearance was very suitable for a Halloween costume party, and it was obvious that he had put in a lot of effort. However, the naga's leather suit only covered half of his body, and his feet were still wearing the school uniform pants. Dake had a deep impression of this back then. "How about we part on good terms?" The ghost raised his hands that were sticking out of the two holes in the leather suit and surrendered. "You see, it's only 5% of the credits. It's not worth wasting our time. You continue to conquer your resource points, and I'll continue to look for the next target. Both of us have a bright future." Dake looked at the ghost, and the anger in his heart suddenly disappeared. He touched his nose, walked forward, and asked curiously, "So, Senior, you've already stolen a lot of people?" "Not bad." The ghost put down his hands. Dark, on the other hand, raised his hand as he walked closer. The ghost's expression suddenly changed. "Hey." However, Dake had already activated the school card in his hand, and the word vampire appeared on the card. As long as the vampire identity was revealed to the other party within 3 meters, regardless of whether the other party saw it clearly or not, the vampiric ability would immediately be activated. For example, Deanna used this little trick to make C. Keat unable to distinguish whether she was a werewolf or a vampire. Of course, after the duel, what should be known would still be known, but the price would be a little heavy. However, if the one who lost the duel was a werewolf or a vampire, they could hide their identity a little. Dake didn't use this trick. Instead, he waited until the ghost saw it clearly before he suddenly said, "Then, Senior, you must have obtained a lot of credits in the event, right?" In the blink of an eye, the ghost's vampiric card sensed the activation of the vampiric ability and immediately connected with Dake's vampiric card. 2 blood-red lines appeared under Dake's feet and quickly spread along the arc until they finally reached the bottom of the ghost's feet. The distance between the two parties was less than 3 meters, and the dual field, outlined by the blood-red lines, was extremely small. Dake didn't have any intention of expanding it. After activating the vampiric ability, he immediately inserted the vampiric card into his card pack and then took out another magic card. The school card emitted a white light from the card pack. After it connected with the huge barrier outside the castle, a spherical transparent barrier was created between the two parties in the duel. When the barrier was formed, the 0 energy number appeared on it, and the duel instantly began. This kind of instant duel didn't require the summoning of the magic fairy again. "Lion Beast." Dake's voice suddenly rose. When the lion beast attacked the python, he quickly retreated, but at the same time, he placed the magic card in front of his chest and summoned with extreme speed. 3-3. 5 of 127. Return to the realm of the underworld. 9,000 words begging for votes. Chapter 635. It's starting, it's starting. In the lounge, Lily's eyes lit up as she stared at the scene in the mirror. From the moment the ghost started to follow the vampire, Kieran had switched her vision over. The ghost stole the treasure from the vampire, and was discovered by the vampire, resulting in a battle. This was the script she had in mind. Now that the script was finally playing out, it was time to place her bets. Who wins and who loses, place your bets. The lounge became restless again. However, It was indeed difficult to choose between the two sides in today's duel. Although Dake Dim Eng was the top student in the second year, Mr. Ghost was a top student in the fourth year. There was a gap of 2 years between them, and there was a considerable gap in knowledge. Even if the math professors were biased towards Dake, if they seriously calculated the odds of winning, Mr. Ghost seemed to have a higher chance of winning. Especially in this kind of real-time battle. Remember the URL VIP VIP, but the battle started faster than they expected. In the name of Dake Dim Eng, I summon Pride 3. When Dake discovered Mr. Ghost's tracks, he had already made preparations in advance. He suddenly swiped Pride 3 in his hand, and a dark golden light burst out from the card surface and condensed into a pillar of light that soared into the sky. The little demonic beast that was enveloped by this pillar of light had a skull pattern between its eyebrows that transformed into the Pride emblem, and the dark golden light was sucked in like spring water. Its body turned into a body of light from the inside out, and its whole body rapidly expanded, and the bat wings on its back furiously spread out. In just an instant, the ferocious-looking, demonic beast appeared with a roar. Its whole body was covered in black clothes, and only the pale skin around its mouth was exposed. The bat symbol imprinted on its chest emitted a scarlet light, and its 2 powerful arms reached down to its knees, and its hands had sharp demon claws that were as sharp as blades. Although it was only a 4-star magic fairy, the aura emitted by the demonic beast was abnormally strong. When Mr. Ghost's eyes showed signs of warning, the demonic beast's figure instantly disappeared without a trace. His expression abruptly changed, and his leisurely and relaxed appearance from before was completely gone. However, at this critical moment, Mr. Ghost made the best decision he could think of. He actually threw himself forward without hesitation. Almost at the same time, the demon beast, behind Kieran, used instant teleport and cast Deathclaw at the spot where Kieran was standing. The huge and sharp demon claws suddenly extended and pierced through the air with the dense power of darkness. Whistling sounds could be heard in the blink of an eye. Ghost was now rolling to the side like a lazy donkey. While rolling, its right hand reached into the card pack. You don't talk about martial virtues. The sudden duel and sneak attack made him curse in his heart, but when he thought about how he was the one who stole, he couldn't say anything. However, when his finger finally touched the magic card, he suddenly heard the hidden snake's painful wail above his head. He suddenly raised his gaze and saw that the 6-star magic fairy, the hidden snake, had its neck pierced by the lion beast's sword. Although he dodged the demon beast's Deathclaw, it hit the hidden snake's back without any hindrance. Even though the hidden snake's defense was as high as 2,500 points, the demon beast's sure-kill skill couldn't cause fatal damage to it. However, when it was distracted, the lion beast seized this flaw and instantly pierced through its defense. Hidden snake. Mr. Ghost's nerves were stretched to the limit at this moment. He almost instantly ordered the hidden snake to cast its sure-kill skill. The hidden snake, who had been severely injured, suddenly raised its head and wailed with a long sword in its neck. Woo! The baby-like wail seemed to pierce through one's eardrums. Dake couldn't help but cover his ears. Then, from the mouth of the hidden snake, a white mist was suddenly spat out. The fog expanded in an instant, enveloping the surrounding 4 to 5 meters. Dake completely lost sight of the interior and couldn't help but frown. Fairy Ibu, Moon Power. Me. Fairy Ibu suddenly raised its head and opened its mouth under the command. The bright and holy moonlight instantly shone into the castle from outside. Its petite and cute body was bathed in the moonlight, and the ball of light formed by the moonlight in its mouth instantly became brighter. Its power doubled. Under normal circumstances, although the moon power's power wasn't weak, it couldn't break through the hidden snake's defense. However, under the moonlight, the moon power's power doubled easily tore through the snow-white mist, but it didn't hit. The white mist was dispersed. The demon beast and the lion beast stood within it. Hidden snake and Mr. Ghost disappeared in an instant. Where did they go? Dake suddenly turned his head, but he didn't find any trace of Mr. Ghost or the hidden snake behind him. In a duel without a defined area, Once one side lost the will to fight, it was very likely that they would pull away and escape. Spider sense. Dake raised the spider pearl again and injected magic into it to release a white ray of light that resembled spider silk. Then, the 360-degree ray of light that had no blind spots immediately helped him sense the existence of Mr. Ghost and the hidden snake. They hadn't escaped. As a top student in the 4th grade, although Mr. Ghost often showed a cheeky face, his self-esteem wasn't inferior to the other students. He couldn't choose to escape in a duel with a second-year student. Above Dake's head, on the ceiling at an extremely high point, the hidden snake, who had grown a pair of wings of light at some point in time, was accumulating power and exploding toward Dake below. Mr. Ghost, on the other hand, was stuck to the ceiling in an extremely strange position. Only his hands were free, and his fingertips were holding several magic cards. By the time Dake discovered it, the invisible hidden snake had already swooped down, bringing with it a fishy wind. Dake's expression immediately changed, and he instantly gathered power under his feet and shot backward. Relying on the power he had gained from chi training, the explosive power he displayed in that instant allowed him to successfully dodge the hidden snake's fatal attack. Beside him, Fairy Ibu controlled 2 ribbons and shot them upward. However, the difference in the basic strength of the 2 magic fairies was completely revealed at this moment. Although Fairy Ibu's ribbons had broken the hidden snake's invisible state, they didn't do anything to obstruct it at all. After the hidden snake lost its main target, it suddenly opened its bloody mouth and bit down on Fairy Ibu. Fairy Ibu was bitten by the bloody mouth and immediately began to struggle. Its passive skill, Charming Body, didn't show any reaction. The hidden snake's fangs pierced through its skin. Demonic Mimi, the dream demon, floating on the side, suddenly let out a panicked cry. Then, the gem on its chest emitted a red light, and it used telekinesis on the hidden snake's bloody mouth in an attempt to open it. However, it wasn't of much use. Beast King Fist. Just as it was getting anxious, a reliable roar suddenly sounded in its ears. A shockwave in the shape of a lion carried a huge force and fiercely blasted the hidden snake's body. Although it didn't cause too much damage, it still sent it flying. The lion beast's tall figure appeared in front of Fairy Ibu, and its gaze was serious as it stared at the hidden snake that had landed on the ground again. The hidden snake, with the wings of light on its back, not only had it gained the ability to fly, but it had also clearly gained a certain degree of strength. On the ceiling, seeing that the situation had stabilized, Mr. Ghost couldn't help but say, "You scared me to death, heh. My reputation was almost destroyed in a single day." Dake raised his head and said sincerely, "Senior's reaction is really fast." Mr. Ghost said with a calm tone, "It's okay." Dake smiled and said, "Then Senior, you should be prepared this time, right?" Again. Mr. Ghost wanted to turn around at this moment, but he suddenly realized that there was no space behind him. He quickly turned his face back and held the magic card in his hand tightly as he hurriedly summoned. On the ground, Dake had already flipped his hand, and there was a bronze mirror in his hand. There were 4 small bronze snakes on the frame of this bronze mirror. It was the bronze snake lens. After holding the bronze snake lens, Dake's spirit was lifted, and his emotions became more agitated, and he seemed to be more impulsive. However, this feeling was suppressed in the next moment. He looked at Mr. Ghost with a clear expression, raised the bronze snake lens in his hand, and slowly shone it at Mr. Ghost. In a formal duel, item cards had to be equipped in the hands of the magic fairy, and the target of the spell couldn't be the contestant on the stage. However, in a real duel, targeting the contestant was the most correct strategy. Although he didn't know how Mr. Ghost stuck to the ceiling, this action didn't actually make him safer. Once the bronze snake lens' petrifying gaze light shone on him, the duel would end instantly. However, after seeing Dake take out a mirror, Mr. Ghost decisively switched to another magic card and summoned again. Obviously, he had a certain degree of understanding of the effects of mirror items. When Dake injected magic into the bronze snake lens, to activate the bronze snake lens's ultimate skill, the petrifying gaze, Mr. Ghost also completed the summoning in an instant. At this moment, both sides made their moves. In the next second, the 4 small snakes on the bronze snake lens opened their snake eyes at the same time and stared at Mr. Ghost, who was above them. The magic card in Mr. Ghost's hand shone brightly, and an ink-black cloak instantly appeared in his hand. He put the summoned magic card into his sleeve, then suddenly grabbed the cloak and shook it. Under his control, the black cloak covered his body like a blanket, and the corners of the cloak were tightly pressed against the ceiling. Magic reflection cloak? In the lounge, Professor Li instantly exclaimed in surprise. The rest of the professors also looked surprised. Obviously, the magic reflection cloak, summoned by Mr. Ghost, was just as surprising as the bronze snake lens, summoned by Dake. It was like a game of rock, paper, scissors. If the bronze snake lens' petrifying gaze light was a rock, then the magic reflection cloak was a piece of cloth. It could be said that it was a perfect match. Therefore, at this moment, the professors who bet on Dake all looked regretful. Once the petrifying gaze light was shot back, Dake would lose completely. In this duel, the enchantment used to protect the students was very delicate. The effect caused by a petrifying skill would also be converted into an energy counter. If it could cause the duelist to lose the ability to fight, the energy counter would be instantly filled to 2,000 points. Of course, there were bound to be some errors. For example, the duelist might not be affected by the petrification, but the enchantment could not be evaluated, and it would still be filled to 2,000 points. In short, the safety of the students must be the priority. The professors calmly looked at the scene in the mirror. However, the gray light that shot out from the bronze snake lens was not reflected by the magic reflection cloak. Under the astonished gazes of the professors, the petrifying gaze light penetrated the magic reflection cloak and hit the enchantment that was tightly attached to the leather cover under the control of Mr. Ghost. The energy counter on the enchantment skyrocketed in an instant. From the original 0 points, it instantly skyrocketed to the blood-red upper limit of 2,000 points. Professor Mitya Bartholomew, who was also in the lounge but did not pay attention to Dake, suddenly frowned and pointed at a magic card on the table. The mirror in front of her also instantly switched from the point of view of Eudora Henley to the point of view of Dake Dimming. Then, the enchantment on Mr. Ghost suddenly shone brightly, and the transparent surface abruptly turned into a staring mirror. The petrifying gaze light that shone on the enchantment was reflected by the mirror and shot toward the hidden snake on the ground that was being held back by the lion beast. The next second, this 7-star jade hidden snake was turned into stone by the reflected petrifying light. Seeing this, the professors turned to look at Professor Mitya almost at the same time. Professor Mitya raised her head and smiled at them. The duel in the castle ended. The petrifying gaze light of the bronze snake lens passed through the magic reflection cloak twice, but it only encountered a slight obstruction before passing through. Obviously, there was a difference in the level of the abilities of these two items. After all, this was an item card made with 3 points of greed, so it was not surprising that this happened. However, Dake didn't feel this way. He didn't even notice the effect of the magic reflection cloak. And because of the magic reflection cloak blocking his vision, he didn't see the changes in the enchantment. Instead, he was very puzzled by the petrifying gaze light that was suddenly reflected back. However, the words "duel ended" were displayed on the duel arena that was previously depicted. Dake paused, put away the bronze snake lens in his hand, and then took out the branch card. The branch card issued a prompt after the duel ended. The winner's name was also displayed on the card. "I won." Dake quickly thought, tried to reverse the result, and finally found some clues. He immediately smiled and said to Mr. Ghost, above his head, "Senior, thank you for your gift." Mr. Ghost slowly lifted the magic reflection cloak, and his face, which was hidden under the snake man leather, looked pained. Compared to Dake below, he obviously knew what happened. The hidden snake that turned into stone below made him feel a lingering fear. When he thought that if there was no enchantment protection, he would be the one turned into stone, and his heart beat more and more violently. However, after he lifted the magic reflection cloak, he forced himself to calm down and said, You won this time, but there won't be a next time. Of course not, Dake said with a smile. After all, my ability can only be used on the same person once. Mr. Ghost tapped the magic cards in his hand, and one of the magic cards emitted a white light that wrapped around him, and then slowly put him down. He gradually landed and said to Dake, "I didn't mean that." Dake smirked, "I know." Then, he bent down and hugged Ibu, who had severely exhausted her magic power, and said to Mr. Ghost, "Time waits for no one. Senior, continue to find your next target. I'm going to the next resource point. Thank you again for your gift." After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and quickly left with the magic elves. Looking at Dake's back as he quickly left, Mr. Ghost gritted his teeth and took out the hidden snake magic card from his card pack. He was going to recall it and summon it again. This way, he could refresh the status of the hidden snake and remove it from the petrification state. However, when he put the hidden snake back into the magic card, he suddenly froze and slowly raised his head. He had removed the summon, but the hidden snake was still standing in the field like a stone statue. It can't be recalled? At this moment, Mr. Ghost's eyes suddenly widened, and then he suddenly turned to the direction Dake left. "Hey! Don't feed it, I can't do anything about it." Dake suddenly sped up and quickly fled. After being petrified by the bronze snake lens, it needed 5 minutes to automatically recover. During this time, even if a normal petrification removal potion was used, it would not be able to remove the petrification. And if the target of the petrification was the magic elves, they could not be recalled back into the card. Dake had already investigated this information through experiments. If Mr. Ghost did not want to leave the petrified hidden snake behind, then he could only wait at the side for 5 minutes. But this senior is so powerful, he should have other magic cards for concealment, right? Even without the hidden snake, he should still be able to follow and steal, right? Even if he doesn't, it's only 5 minutes. The activity time is 6 hours, and there are 72 5-minutes. 2 minutes later, Dake and Mr. Ghost put some distance between them and continued to search for the 8th resource point. Fairy Ibu had already been recalled back into the magic card and was replaced by the 3-star Demon Fox. He had already checked his credits. Just as he felt, Mr. Ghost was an outstanding student with great strength. He had obtained close to 8,000 credits in the activity, and of course, it was impossible for him to only rely on steal. And after Dake won the duel, he had obtained 800 credits in one go, making a killing. I wonder if he's a 4th or 5th year. Could I meet him in the golden competition? After the duel just now, Dake's hands were itching. That senior must be holding back his anger, wanting to win in a proper duel? Just as he was about to replenish the fairy Ibu's magic, Dake finally found the location of the 8th resource point. According to the map, this resource point was located in a corner of the castle, and not in a room. He carefully crept into this dark corner that no one cared about. Suddenly, his vision turned black, and he realized that the faint light had also disappeared in an instant. Although he had disguised himself as a vampire, he wasn't a real vampire after all. He couldn't see things in complete darkness. Thus, he subconsciously took a step back. The light returned in an instant. This is the puzzle of this resource point? Finding the key to the key point in complete darkness? Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he realized that he had arrived at the location of the resource point. But he did not go in again, and instead turned to look at the demon beast. The demon beast had not degenerated after its evolution. Although it could not be considered a vampire, it had a certain degree of night vision like the little demon beast. Although the lion beast also had this ability, it was still unable to see in complete darkness. In comparison, the demon beast was the darling of the darkness. To it, the darkness was like a mother's embrace, and it was like a fish in water. "Hurry up," Dake urged. The demon beast's mouth curled up, and it arrogantly said, "Leave it to me." Then it flapped its wings, and suddenly dived into the darkness. And the sound of its wings flapping suddenly disappeared as it continued to enter. Dake frowned, and said in a low voice, Even the sound is blocked? Light and sound were the two main sources of information for humans to identify their environment. In an environment without light and sound, very few people could maintain a calm state of mind. Dake could not guarantee that he would not panic. I wonder who designed the mechanism of this resource point. He leaned against the wall, waiting patiently. But after waiting for 2 minutes, there was a roar that sounded like silk being torn apart. "Lion beast," Dake said calmly. The lion beast held the hilt of its sword and was about to go forward. After being summoned, the demon fox, that had not participated in a battle yet immediately said, "Let me do it." Dake was a little surprised. "Are you sure?" The demon fox glanced at the lion beast and said, "Give me the sword." The lion beast frowned, but still passed the single scabbard to it. The demon fox took the scabbard and narrowed its eyes slightly. It felt the power transmitted from the holy sword, and revealed a slight smile. Then, it suddenly frowned and said, "I'll be back soon." Doc nodded and allowed it to attack with its sword. The demon fox was a magic guide spirit that specialized in magic power. Its magic power was more than 300 points of 3-star perfection. But its attack power was also 1,500 points. Its attack talent was maxed out. The single scabbard could give it an additional 900 points of attack. After the addition, it could reach 2,400 points. Although it was far from the Diru beast and the lion beast, if the opponent was a 5-star or 6-star magic guide spirit that was not good at defense, it could break through the defense. As long as it could break through the defense, the demon fox had the confidence to win. Dake leaned against the wall and continued to wait. On his right was a dead silence of darkness, but on his left was a battle that was gradually becoming more and more intense. The sounds of the battle between the demon fox and the ghosts could be heard frequently, and he could not help but divert his attention away from the darkness. But when the demon fox returned from the battle, the demon beast still had not walked out of the darkness. There are only 2 minutes left before the evolution ends. Dake could not help but squint his eyes. If it really did not work, he could only use another method to disperse the darkness in this corner. Although this method was definitely not in line with the purpose of the professors when designing this level, who told him to be only a second-year student. Dake looked at the darkness, and his mind was quickly thinking. There were many ways to disperse the darkness, but he could only think of 2 with the strongest effects. One was 2-star Ibu's field skill, Great Clear Sky, Pride. The other was the Radiant Night Pearl's sure kill skill, Radiant Night Concubine. The Radiant Sun and the Bright Moon were the 2 magic treasures that could disperse the darkness. Just as Dake was thinking about this, his heart suddenly moved, and he moved to the right. In that instant, the evil devil beast's body suddenly appeared beside him. Clearly, it used instant transmission. "What's the situation?" Dake suddenly asked. The demon beast's appearance was very miserable. Even though its magic value did not decrease, its body was covered in all kinds of messy marks, and there was even some mucus-like disgusting mucus. The demon beast's face was tense, but it still said with its nose pointed to the sky, "There are many small things that can't be touched, don't mind them. I've already found the mechanism and completely dispelled it." "You've already dispelled it?" Dake was slightly surprised, and could not help but look at the darkness. But in that silent darkness, there was naturally no movement. The demon beast saw that he did not believe it, and hurriedly said, "It's a puzzle-like puzzle, a bit like the Huarong Dao you once mentioned. You need to move one of the puzzle pieces to the exit, and it's very difficult. Of course, it's not difficult for a great demon beast like me." All right, I believe you." Dake patted its shoulder, calming it down, and asked, "And then?" The demon beast's face reddened, "And then I'll immediately come out and inform by—" In that instant, a slimy tentacle full of suction cups suddenly shot out from the darkness and wrapped around the demon beast's legs. The demon beast was still talking when it was suddenly pulled inside by the tentacle. With its 2,000 points of attack power, it was completely no match for the tentacle, and was instantly dragged to the ground, and then pulled inside. It lay on the ground, and its huge claws scratched the ground. The sound of the claws scratching the ground was unusually ear-piercing. The demonic beast raised its head and looked at Dark, its eyes filled with heartbreaking despair. But just as it was about to be pulled into the darkness, the time limit for its evolution was up. Pooh! The tall demon beast instantly degenerated into a small demon beast. Its legs that were wrapped around by the tentacle naturally disappeared. Oh! The small demon beast screamed, and hurriedly flapped its wings to escape into Dake's arms. Dake hugged it and immediately retreated. The lion beast and demon fox adjusted their positions, and blocked in front of him to prevent the tentacle from attacking again. The corridor was completely silent. In the darkness that sealed off everything, even the sound of the monster's wriggling could not be heard. Looks like the demon beast has indeed solved the puzzle, and summoned the monster of this resource point. Dake's expression was somewhat serious. The tentacle's strength should be above 3,000 points of attack, and it was most likely a 7-star elite-level monster like the King of Spectres. It was not impossible to kill a 7-star elite-level monster. But if it only hid in that dark corner and did not come out, the difficulty of killing it would be at least 2 levels higher. In the end, do I still have to dispel that darkness? Dake reached into his card bag and decisively pulled out Fantasy Beast, Ibu, and Pride 2-3. In the name of Dake Dimeng, I summon Fantasy Beast, Ibu. In the snow-white light of summoning, little Ibu's body gradually appeared. Dake carefully observed the darkness, and quickly said, after a while, use Great Clear Sky on that corner. Squeak. Although Ibu did not know what was in that dark corner, he still nodded resolutely. Dake waited until the cooldown of his normal summoning skills was over, and immediately activated Pride 2. As the light of Pride 2 shone down, Ibu's eyes became even brighter, rising from 1 star to 2 stars. Then, he gathered a bit of power, and spat out a ball of light that gathered the power of the sun at that dark corner. The ball of light entered the darkness, and was instantly swallowed. But when Great Clear Sky's effect completely activated, the darkness in that corner was dispelled like snow. Dake finally saw the situation in that corner clearly. On both sides of the corner, there were old tables and chairs. Some of the tables and chairs were pushed aside, revealing the props on the wall behind them. They were exactly the same as the demon beast's description. Beside the wall, between the tables and chairs, there were 10 or so white specters floating in the air. Each specter had a funny expression, and they frequently let out strange cackles. When they stuck out their tongues, they were half the size of their bodies, and covered in wet mucus. There were also all kinds of strange toys scattered on the ground. It was clear that these 10 or so specters had used all kinds of toys to make the demon beast look so miserable. But from the fact that the demon beast could not do anything to them, they were not as weak as they seemed. But this was not the main point. The main point was the huge monster that was lying on the ground like a black shadow. The monster's body was like a huge hat, lying limply on the ground. The color of its body was completely black, and an octopus tentacle with suction cups extended from the bottom of its hat-like body. But when it slightly straightened its body, it could be seen that there were even more tentacles hidden under its body. Dake did not see it too clearly. The thing in that corner was exposed for a moment, but it was immediately swallowed up by the darkness that reappeared. Even the ball of light that released Great Clear Sky was completely swallowed up. Dake once again lost sight of the darkness. Squeak! Ibu immediately let out an angry cry. Dake said solemnly, even Great Clear Sky can't completely disperse the darkness? Will the same thing happen when I use Radiant Night Pearl? At this moment, the fox demon beast in front of him suddenly said, but I've already seen it. Indeed, seeing it clearly once is enough. Dake smirked and took out a new magic card from his card bag. He asked, so, are you ready, Fox Demon Beast? The Fox Demon Beast was energized and immediately said, of course. In that case, Dake placed the magic card between his index and middle finger and swiped it forward. Swipe the card, evolve. Under the light of Bliss 3, the Fox Demon Beast evolved into a 9-tailed fox. The 9-tailed golden fox suddenly raised its chin in the scattered light, and the blue flames at the end of its tail and feet suddenly rose. Its forehead and the upper part of its limbs had a Tai Chi pattern that symbolized Tao. The two antennae on its neck were like colorful ropes used for rituals, and the tip was like a golden bell. After it finished evolving, it immediately turned around and pounced on Dake, licking his face fiercely. Dake was already experienced and took half a step back. He was only licked but didn't fall down. "Now is not the time to mess around," he said very calmly. "Since that monster is hiding in the dark corner and doesn't dare to come out, then we'll attack it until it has no choice but to come out." The nine-tailed fox unwillingly turned around and faced the dark corner again. Then, it began to accumulate power. From the tip of its 9 tails, blue fireballs appeared one after another. Under Dake's command, it released Ghost Fire Jade and Fox Fire Dragon at the same time. Boom! The 9 blue fireballs surrounded the giant blue fire dragon and blasted towards the dark corner. Although the fireballs and fire dragon completely lost their sound and light when they entered the darkness, there were still waves of heat coming out of the darkness. In the eerily quiet environment, the 9-tailed fox's attack did indeed cause damage to the monster hiding in the darkness. Dake squinted his eyes to observe and decisively ordered, "Next, Fox Lightning." Ing! The 9-tailed fox suddenly raised its head and released blue lightning at the center of the giant monster. A short thunder roar came to an abrupt end after the lightning shot into the darkness. Dake immediately said, "It's time. Let it have a taste of Tengu's power." The 9-tailed fox's 4 limbs stood up, and the blue flames under its feet rose fiercely, forming a terrifying energy ball with the flames all over its body. When the energy in the energy ball reached its peak, the 9-tailed fox suddenly threw it into the dark corner. The darkness swallowed the ball of light. However, the waves of heat produced by Tengu's explosion broke through the darkness. After a short period of silence, the loud explosion completely erupted. The floor beneath their feet shook. Although the darkness wasn't dispelled, the effects of the silence and light had already been riddled with holes. Dake comforted the exhausted 9-tailed fox and patiently waited for the tentacle monster's reaction. But 1 minute later, 2 minutes later, the aftermath of Tengu's explosion had subsided, and there were still no monsters coming out of the darkness. Dake put the 9-tailed fox back into the magic card, then grabbed the little devil beast on his shoulder and said, "Understand?" "Understood." The little devil beast responded and flapped its wings to fly over. Then it went into the darkness again. In less than half a second, it came out again. The decadence just now had completely disappeared. Dake saw its excited expression and guessed the possible result. But the little devil beast rolled its eyes and went back in. And not long after, Dake's school card had a considerable amount of credits. The darkness, after the giant monster died, still didn't disperse. Another while later, the little devil beast flew out with a bunch of candies and a dark blue gemstone. After handing over the candies and gems in its claws to Dark, it proudly said, "Little devil beast, you've killed a 7-star monster. Little devil beast, you killed a 7-star monster." While the little devil beast was repeatedly bragging, Dake counted the number of candies and then checked the gemstone. This gemstone was the size of a palm and was extremely heavy. There seemed to be liquid flowing inside the gemstone. When he leaned close to his ear, he could hear the sound of waves. But its aura wasn't pure. It was mixed with the dark aura that Dake was more familiar with. Dark attribute plus water attribute? Dake couldn't help but frown. Logically speaking, this kind of gemstone that was rich in energy should be an excellent material to refine a magic elfin. But he couldn't think of a target with dark and water attributes for the time being. "I'll keep it first and look at it later. It will come in handy eventually. Even if it doesn't work, it'll be completely random. I haven't tried my luck for a long time." Thinking of this, Dake's eyebrows relaxed. He put away all the gemstones and candies, looked up and said to the little devil beast, "Calm down, it's time to continue." Little devil, the little dream demon suddenly went from behind Dake to in front of him, then squeezed out a tentacle and pointed behind him. Dake was instantly alert. "Is there another ghost?" It wasn't a ghost. A senior student walked out from the direction that the dream demon was pointing at. He said in a low voice, It seems that you've successfully conquered this resource point. What a pity. Brothers, it's the last few days of October. If you don't vote, the votes will expire. Don't waste it. Chapter 636. Could it be a seductress? Dake calmed down and sized him up carefully. The senior in front of him was wearing a blue-black tuxedo and a pair of shiny leather shoes. In short, below his neck, he was dressed very formally, but above his neck. First of all, the Prajna mask with 2 red blossoms on it made people feel powerless to ridicule him. Secondly, it was unknown what kind of fuel he used to make his hair a mix of 7 different colors, and it was even emitting fluorescent light. Just based on this outfit, Dake was very certain that this was definitely not a senior from the aristocratic academy. Otherwise, it was impossible for him not to have any impression of him. The magical elf accompanying this senior was a ghost that was also wearing the same Prajna mask as him. However, unlike the senior's mask, the Prajna mask worn by his magic elf didn't have any messy blushes. The entire mask was ferocious and terrifying, as if it was directly grown on the face. There were 2 sharp horns on both sides of the magic elf's head, and its hair was abnormally lush. Apart from that, its body was completely enveloped in a wide robe, making it impossible to easily identify its species. Remember, https://m. Vipkanshu. VIP, don't worry, I'm not a seductress either. Seeing Dake's vigilant gaze, the senior chuckled softly. I just happened to bump into the same resource point as you. According to the rules of first come, first served, it belongs to you. So, I just watched from the sidelines for a while. In other words, if Dake couldn't conquer this resource point, he would take over. This didn't sound like there was anything wrong with it. However, Dake sensed the problem after thinking for a while. According to the senior's words, he had been watching from the sidelines for a while. However, if he hadn't walked out himself, Dake wouldn't have even noticed his existence. Moreover, unlike the ghost senior from before, he didn't seem to have used any concealment sure-kill skills. Generally speaking, such a situation would only occur between 2 people with a greater difference in strength. Dake realized that he might have encountered a tough nut to crack. He pondered for a moment and asked, "May I ask who this senior is?" However, the senior still chuckled in an unpleasant tone. This is a masquerade ball. It's common sense to not ask the other party's identity, right? Dake smiled and said, but there are times when you really want to know. Isn't the original intention of a masquerade party to facilitate social interaction? Haha, you're right. The senior finally said, 5th grade, House of Fools. Remember my name, Vern Morse, a name destined to shock the world. The 5th grade House of Fools actually has such a character? Dark muttered to himself as he looked at Vern Morse's back as he leisurely left. There was no conflict between the 2 sides, and Fern Morse did not show too much malice. Before understanding his opponent's strength, Dake didn't want to start a fight. But from Fern Morse's self-introduction, he was definitely not someone who was willing to be lonely. Such a person should be very outstanding. It was impossible for him to be penniless until now. Unless, he had only recently obtained enough capital to cause such a change. Forget it, I'll definitely have more opportunities to observe him in the future. Dake shook his head and refocused his attention on the masquerade party. An opportunity like this year's masquerade party to obtain a large amount of credits was hard to come by. There are still about 5 hours before it ends at midnight. The fight for the resource points will become more and more intense. I have to work harder. Dake opened his school card, opened the 3-dimensional resource map, and continued to choose resource points on the 6th floor. Let's do this. After making a quick decision, he called the magic guide fairies to continue forward. After putting away Demon Fox and Illusory Beast, Ibu, he only had Lion Beast, Single Scabbard, Little Devil Beast, Magician Secretary, and Dream Demon by his side. But apart from the Lion Beast and the Scabbard, the other magic spirits didn't have much head-on combat capabilities. Thus, as he ran towards his target, he quickly thought of summoning another magic guide fairy. But at this time, his lack of high-star magic guide fairies became more and more obvious. In the end, other than Fairy Ibu and Diru Beast, the only 4-star magic guide fairy left was Big Milk Jar. Let's do Big Milk Jar. Even though Big Milk Jar was not very aggressive under normal circumstances, it could still be used as a defense. With Lion and Scabbard as a sword and Big Milk Jar as a shield, it could barely attack and defend at the same time. On the way to the 9th resource point, they encountered 3 lone monsters, but they were all cleanly killed by Lion. During the process, Magician Secretary used a normal summoning spell and successfully summoned Big Milk Can. Then, Big Milk Tank immediately used its ultimate skill, Milk Drink, creating milk that could recover half of its maximum mana. After drinking the milk, Lion Beast quickly recovered to its peak state. But when everything was ready, Dake found that the 9th resource point was empty. Looking at the empty resource point, he frowned and said, "Looks like this resource point has already been broken through. We can only go to the next one." He opened the resource map and quickly looked for the next target. After finding it, he sped up. However, this resource point had still been emptied by someone. "It's getting harder and harder." Dake had no choice but to open the resource map again and look for the next target. From the 6th floor of the castle onwards, it was completely the domain of the senior students. Their ability to move and the speed at which they conquered resource points was not something that the junior students could compare to. Such a result could only be said to be expected. Dake was not discouraged. Finally, at the location of the next target, he found a resource point that had not been broken through yet. He let out a sigh of relief and immediately ordered Dream Demon and Big Milk Jar to guard outside. As for himself, he brought Lion Beast and Little Devil Beast into the classroom where the resource point was located. This was a rather large, empty classroom. Apart from the podium, there was only a cupboard in the corner. Other than that, there was not even a table or chair. When Dake walked into the classroom, a magic wand on the podium suddenly stood up. Dake paused and cautiously held the magic wand. Then, he immediately felt a suction force. Magic flowed into the magic wand through his fingers. As the tip of the magic wand emitted a bright light, Dake's right hand was lifted up by the magic wand and then pointed at the blackboard. After a moment, the light of magic radiated toward the blackboard's blind spot. When the light dissipated, a total of 3 lines of words appeared on the blackboard. "Is this a problem-solving level?" Dake's heart suddenly understood. He immediately picked up the magic wand and quickly browsed through the questions. The first question is about the editing of the magic language. The second question is a mathematical problem. The third question is a comprehensive problem that combines the magic language and mathematics. After looking at the general model of the questions, Dake prepared to start from the first question and seriously solve it. But at this time, there was a sudden whistling sound outside the door. He subconsciously turned his head and saw a senior with thin wings on her back. She rode the wind and landed at the door. Both of them looked at each other and sized each other up. Fairy Princess Iluri Clarissa. Dake recognized who it was at first glance and couldn't help but whisper. Iluri Clarissa was a 5th-grade noble student. She was noble and had royal blood. She was known as the Shangmalian Fairy Princess. She had an otherworldly beauty like a fairy. As a famous celebrity duelist, Iluri Clarissa was impeccable in terms of family background, character, and personal strength. In addition, she also participated in Professor Ka Zayer's alchemy class. Iluri Clarissa was like Luo Si. She wore a fairy's makeup. Her long blonde hair was tied into a ponytail. Her bangs were light and her eyelashes were long. Her face was delicate and her figure was slender. "So it's Junior Dake Dimming." Iluri Clarissa took the initiative to greet him after sizing him up. Dake had to temporarily put down the wand in his hand and responded, "Hello, Senior. I didn't expect to meet you here. There's something even more unexpected." Iluri Clarissa raised her hand with a smile and suddenly showed her school card. "Sorry, I'm a genuine fairy." The fairy princess was a fairy. It was as reasonable as a vampire being a vampire. Dake was speechless. He immediately turned his head to look at the blackboard again and carefully read the first question. On the other hand, Iluri Clarissa chuckled softly and quickly entered the classroom. She glanced at the 3 questions on the blackboard and saw another wand on the podium. She reached out and grabbed it. Then, in the middle of the blackboard, under the question, there was a vertical line that went all the way to the end, dividing the entire blackboard into 2 areas for answering questions. She used the wand to push aside the blonde hair on her temples and went to Dake's right side and began to read the question. A competition that purely tested one's academic ability had begun. In the professor's lounge, several mathematics professors looked at each other. Professor Eric, who was in the 4th year, suddenly asked, "Who came up with this question?" "I'm talking about the 3rd question." But the professors all shook their heads. Only Lily proudly said, "Of course it's me. How is it?" "It's okay." Professor Eric immediately smiled and said, "So it's Lily who came up with the questions, then it's okay. Let's guess who can solve these 3 questions faster than me? By the way, Winifred, Clarissa is your student, right? I don't remember you teaching mathematics in your class." Professor Winifred, who was in the 5th year, was about the same age as Professor Eric, about 50 years old. He touched his red nose and shook his head. "Of course Clarissa is my student, and I didn't teach mathematics, directly. But since I've already read mathematics, it's natural for me to touch on some mathematical ideas after teaching." Eric nodded. "That's interesting. It seems that Clarissa has a big advantage." But Professor Winifred said again, "You can't say that. Lily's second question obviously involves some kind of formula. Even if Clarissa can solve it with an earthwork method, Dake Dimeng, who wrote these formulas himself, will definitely be faster." "I have my reservations." The other professors also agreed. Clarissa's level of magic language was higher than Dake's. Dake's level of mathematics was higher than Clarissa's. Both sides had an equal advantage. Before the final result of this academic competition came out, it was impossible to determine who would win. The professors were all talking and laughing as they watched the 2 solve the questions through the mirror. The process of solving the questions was similar to what the professors expected. Dake was at a disadvantage in solving the first question. While he was still thinking hard, Clarissa had already solved it quickly. The fairy princess, who temporarily stopped solving the question, could not help but blink at Dake on her left. Dake's expression changed. His eyes instantly became serious, and his thinking speed became faster. His level of magic language was indeed not as good as Clarissa's, but as long as he solved this question, he would be able to catch up with the second question. Eliza Clarissa chuckled again and read the second question seriously. Then her eyebrows gradually frowned. Phew! Finally, Dake successfully solved the first question. After he stopped, he glanced at Clarissa on his right and found that she had a serious expression on her face. She was writing rapidly on the blackboard about the solution to the second question. He was very curious about what Clarissa wrote, but when he looked from the side, he could not see the handwriting at all. It was obvious that some kind of anti-spying magic had been cast. "Then she shouldn't be able to see my handwriting." After Dake understood, he immediately focused on solving the second question. The second question was so simple that it made people speechless. He only spent less than 2 minutes to solve it completely. In terms of solving speed, he completely overwhelmed Clarissa. And he only solved a small part of the problem. The last question. After confirming that Clarissa was still solving the second question, Dake's heart completely calmed down. He looked at the third question with full concentration. The third question was obviously more complicated than the first 2 questions, and the difficulty of solving it was also 2 levels higher. When he finished reading it for the first time, he was not even sure if he could solve it. And if he could not solve it, then the advantage he built on the second question would collapse in an instant. But he did not panic. At this time, the more anxious he was, the more mistakes he would make. If he still could not solve it with all his strength, then he just had to admit that his level was not enough. This was not something to be ashamed of. Without accumulating small steps, there was no way to travel 1,000 miles. Without accumulating small streams, there was no way to form a vast sea. Learning was not something that could be done in one step. What he lacked was only time. But with this stable state of mind, Dake quickly found the way to solve the problem. He picked up his magic wand and wrote on the blackboard very smoothly. When Clarissa finally solved the second question by relying on the traditional method, Dake had already solved most of it. Clarissa took a deep breath. Her previous ease had long been thrown to Java. As a 5th grade top student, she certainly could not accept that she lost to a 2nd grade student in academic ability. As the pure magic power poured into her brain, her eyes lit up, and her thinking became extremely clear. The speed of her thinking suddenly accelerated. She used the experience of solving the second question and directly applied it effectively to the third question. The professors in the lounge immediately noticed Clarissa's acceleration. The outcome of this academic competition had once again become complicated and confusing. The competition between Dake and Clarissa instantly heated up. Although there was no smoke, it was still like entering a battlefield. Dark's magic elves could feel the tense atmosphere in the classroom, and they were all secretly encouraging the students. During this time, some people came to the door of this resource point, but after seeing the fairy princess in the classroom, they all shook their heads and left. They obviously did not think that Clarissa could not conquer this resource point. As time slowly passed, Dake and Clarissa's solving progress was quickly approaching the end. Although Clarissa started to solve the third question later, she showed a trend of catching up. Dake was steadily advancing, relying on the advantages left in front to take the lead. Whoosh! At that moment, both sides stopped writing almost at the same time. Then they subconsciously turned their heads to look at each other, their eyes flashing sharply. Who won? The professors and magic elves all immediately perked up and stared intently. In this situation, they could only rely on the mechanism itself to make a judgment. Under the gaze of so many pairs of eyes, Dake's magic wand lit up, while Clarissa's magic wand turned gray. Even the answer she left on the blackboard turned into dust and scattered with the wind. The loser exited. I actually lost? Clarissa's eyes flashed with an unknown color. However, her good upbringing allowed her to maintain a smile on her face. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Dake's magic wand suddenly vibrated violently. The lion beast immediately calmed down from the joy of empathizing with Clarissa and pressed his big hand on the hilt of his sword. Big Milk can also jogged to Dake's side and looked up with a solemn expression. Dake quickly turned around and said to Clarissa, "Senior, please leave for a moment." Okay. Clarissa took a deep breath. However, before she left the classroom, she still asked unwillingly, "How did you solve the second question so quickly?" Dake grasped the magic wand in his hand and said simply, "I only know a little mathematics." Mathematics? Clarissa felt that she had heard of this term before, but she had never paid much attention to it. "If you have any doubts, let's talk after the event." Dake couldn't hide the smile on his face, but he really couldn't suppress the magic wand in his hand. Clarissa glanced at the magic wand and said, "Okay, after the event." "Ah, okay." Dake casually replied. The magic wand in his hand suddenly shot up, completely out of his control. On the other hand, Clarissa took a step forward and exited the classroom as light as a feather. She watched as the magic wand flew up and hit the ceiling. Then, black mucus dripped from the magic wand. She turned around and left quickly, unusually decisive. Prepare for battle. On the other hand, Dark suddenly shouted and quickly retreated to the door. The black mucus dripping from the magic wand formed a circle on the floor in the middle of the classroom. The viscous liquid spread out at an extremely fast speed, forming an ink-like black pool. A worm-like monster slowly emerged from the black pool. The surface of the monster's body was bubbling like boiling water. The bubbles emitted a pungent smell like sulfuric acid. Its body was more than 1 meter in diameter. After it completely emerged from the black pool, it was at least 10 meters long. The magic wand on the ceiling finally fell down and fell on the head of the huge black worm. In the blink of an eye, the black mucus wrapped around the wand and turned it into a pitch-black horn dripping with mucus. Giant abyssal worm. Dake swallowed his saliva and recognized the origin of this huge black worm. According to the records of a book, this kind of creature lived in an extremely harsh environment underground. The black mucus secreted from their body was extremely difficult to decompose. It could remain underground for hundreds of years without fading. Therefore, some people would mix the mucus into ink and use it to write important books. However, Dake didn't know much about this kind of giant abyssal worm. He only knew that the giant abyssal worm was the nightmare of the goblins. It had destroyed countless goblin tribes. The giant abyssal worm in front of him was at least a 7-star elite monster. Next, it was a direct battle with the giant abyssal worm. In the lounge, Professor Bacon whispered to Li, "You made this giant abyssal worm?" "Of course." Li nodded proudly. Professor Bacon's expression changed. He couldn't help but ask, "Don't tell me you have worm silver?" "Yes, it's in here." Professor Li pointed at the mirror and said. Professor Bacon was stunned. At this time, Dake was quickly commanding the lion beast to fight back. The giant abyssal worm's skin was thick. Its defense was estimated to be above 3,300 points. Its attack wasn't that high among the 7-star magic elves, but it wasn't too low either. Its mana was definitely higher than normal because it was strengthened. The crafting technique of this kind of one-time use magic elves was much more advanced than normal crafting, but if one could master it, the crafting process would be much less than normal crafting. However, one-time use magic elven cards couldn't be stored for a long time, so they couldn't be stored. For example, all the monsters in tonight's masquerade party could only be stored until midnight. The professors could also forcibly inject magic power into their bodies regardless of the cost to make their health bar longer. Judging from the 3 measurements, the giant abyssal worm would definitely crush the lion beast. Except for its attack. The lion beast's attack was as high as 3,800 points after it was equipped with a single scabbard. If it tried its best, it might be able to defeat the giant abyssal worm. Sword Dance. When the battle started, Dake decisively gave the order to use the sword dance. Roar. The lion beast roared fiercely, and its aura reached its limit. The single scabbard in its hand was surrounded by violent airflow. The airflow grew stronger as it moved forward, and it eventually formed a storm around its body. After the lion beast got close, it leaped up and slashed down with its sword with both hands. This slash had 6,100 points of power. It carried a horrifying aura that was about to split the giant abyssal worm in half. The giant abyssal worm felt threatened and let out a sharp insect cry. The horn on its head was surging violently, and it slightly bent down and fiercely slashed at the lion beast. Bang! The moment the lion beast's horn clashed with the sword, it moved the single scabbard slightly to the side and avoided the sharpest tip of the horn. Then, it cut into the horn like cutting tofu and continued to slash down amidst the accumulated sounds of friction. It had actually split the horn in half. The lion beast's sword didn't stop there. After splitting the horn, it continued to slash at the giant abyssal worm's head. Its black shell was completely split open, and its pink soft flesh was exposed. Ugh! Amidst the screams, the giant abyssal worm controlled the black slime flowing on its body and crazily rushed up to its head, flowing into the wound that the lion beast cut open. The slime quickly solidified and forcefully stuck the single scabbard's blade. The lion beast held the hilt and couldn't pull it out. It immediately let go of its right hand and punched out. Beast King Fist. Although this punch didn't have the bonus of the single scabbard's attack power, the shockwave rushed into the giant abyssal worm's wound and still caused considerable damage. The giant abyssal worm's high defense was reflected on its outer shell, and its inner shell was also soft. The key was that the tissue that stuck to the blade was also shattered. The lion beast used the reaction force from the Beast King Fist and stepped on the giant abyssal worm's head. Finally, it successfully pulled out the sword. It adjusted its posture in the air and quickly landed. Then, it charged forward again without stopping. At this time, Dake had already summoned the war horn and handed it to the milk can, who was eager to try. Moo moo, the milk can was happy to get a treasure. It immediately picked up the war horn and blew it with all its might. Woo woo, in the long sound of the war horn, the milk can triggered the war horn's war roar. Behind it, there seemed to be an illusion of a battle-hardened soldier. A giant rhinoceros raised its head and roared. That roar was as loud as thunder, and it made the giant abyssal worm's ferocious aura stagnate. The lion beast felt its anger rising in the roar. A flash of madness appeared in its eyes, and a surge of energy burst out from its body. Its strength skyrocketed, and its attack power increased by another 300 points. His normal attack power of 4,100 points cut open the giant abyssal worm's shell again, and almost cut half of its body in half. The giant abyssal worm howled in pain, and its thick tail violently swung at the lion beast. However, the lion beast agilely leaped into the air and dodged the sweeping tail. The giant abyssal worm's attack failed, and it suddenly opened its mouth. Black ripples appeared in its mouth, and a giant water column was instantly shot out. The water column continued to shoot out. Although it didn't hit the lion beast at first, the giant abyssal worm suddenly turned its head, and the water column moved horizontally. Finally, it hit the lion beast. The lion beast blocked the water column with a single scabbard at the critical moment, but how could a long sword block the water column? Its mana instantly plummeted, and its entire body was blown away and smashed into the wall. Ing! The giant abyssal worm let out a ferocious cry, and then swung its tail and chased after the lion beast. The lion beast slid down from the wall, but the sword in its hand was still very stable. Moo! The milk can threw out a bottle of milk. It raised its hand and caught it. It poured all of it into its mouth, and its mana that had dropped by half was instantly replenished. Healers had always been an indispensable part of the boss raid. Although the milk cans drink milk had a long cooldown, Dake had made a lot of sure kill skill cards for it. In this kind of real battle, it could provide endless supplies for the frontline warriors. No matter how long the giant abyssal worm's HP bar was, it couldn't have as much milk as the milk can. In this battle, after it failed to kill the lion beast in one hit, there was no suspense anymore. It took a few minutes. The lion beast finally pierced through the giant abyssal worm's head with its sword, and this fierce battle completely ended. The giant abyssal worm's huge body fell down after its mana was exhausted. Its huge body disintegrated into countless mana light spots and scattered in all directions. And at its head, a gift box floated in the air. The lion beast took a deep breath, grabbed the gift box in its hand, and walked towards Dake. It took a long time to conquer this resource point. Dake took the gift box and said in a low voice, "I hope this gift box can give me some compensation." As he said that, he carefully opened the gift box and revealed the hidden inside. Worm silver. Looking at the worm silver, that looked almost the same as the silver, Dake was instantly moved. This piece of worm silver emitted a strong bug-type energy wave, and it was shocking. Although the dark attribute plus water attribute gem that he had previously obtained was of the highest quality, compared to this worm silver, it was instantly inferior. I remember that this kind of silver that is rich in bug-type energy is called worm silver, right? Dake's eyelids twitched as he couldn't help but say, "The professors are so generous." Worm silver status among bug-type materials was like mithril status among silver ores, and its rarity made its value even higher than its actual value. Only the Shang Malian Academy, which was sitting in the dungeon, could give out such an item as a reward in the event. Dake's face was extremely surprised as he resealed the worm silver and stuffed it into his backpack along with the gift box. This piece of worm silver didn't have any aura of other attributes, and it was a pure bug-type material. It could be used as the refining core of any bug-type magic elf. After the event ended, he needed to think carefully about which insect-type magical guiding spirit he should refine into. I wonder if I can refine a green caterpillar that can evolve into a void ripper? Dake walked out of the classroom with a smile on his face. After that, he continued to look for unconquered resource points. However, the number of upperclassmen on the 6th floor seemed to be increasing, and the resource points that were distributed on this floor were being fought over by many people, so his harvest wasn't ideal. Could it be that the resource points on the 7th, 8th, and 9th floor are too difficult to conquer? After being robbed once again, Dake couldn't help but think this way. He spent a lot of time on the 6th floor, and not only did he encounter a few 5th-year students, He even saw a few sixth-year students. And after he obtained the worm silver, he was only lucky enough to snatch a resource point. Although the puzzle of the resource point was also very difficult, it was exactly what he wanted. It was a checkpoint related to equipment refinement. After he broke through it, he used the lion beast as the main force to defeat the elite-level ghost in this resource point. It was a mummy hidden in a coffin. Other than its damage immunity ability, which was very troublesome, it didn't pose much of a threat to him. However, the lion beast was already exhausted after this battle. Dake put it away and replaced it with the Diru beast. Other than the lion beast and the Diru beast, the only magic elf he had that could continue fighting was the young blue-eyed dragon. But the young blue-eyed dragon wasn't that useful. After the 7-star mummy was killed, it dropped another, soul bead. Soul bead was a type of ghost-type material, and a few more wouldn't be too much. However, the quality of this soul bead was much inferior to the one dropped by the King of Spectres, so Dake didn't have much hope for it. Time passed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, the 8 o'clock bell rang from the direction of the spiral clock tower. Dake had broken through a total of 10 resource points, and he was still halfway to the bottom line of 20 resource points. Since the 6th floor of the castle was almost cleared by the upperclassmen, he had to make a choice. One was to break through the 20 resource points as soon as possible and explore the resource points on the lower floor of the castle. The other was to pursue the higher quality resources given by the resource points and explore the higher floors. The difficulty of solving the checkpoints on the 6th floor of the castle is already very high. The elite-level ghosts summoned in the end are basically 7-star. Based on this, the elite-level ghosts summoned in the 7th floor should be 8-star. Elite-level ghosts are weaker than boss-level ghosts, but because it's limited to one person, the difficulty isn't much lower. But from my point of view, I have the ability to kill an 8-star elite ghost alone. The problem is, can I solve the puzzle before summoning the 8-star ghost? And how do I deal with the normal ghosts that I encounter along the way? I might encounter a group of 7-star ghosts on the 7th floor of the castle. If it's not a fiend or a dark-type ghost, the Diru beast will have a hard time dealing with it. Even the green-eyed baby dragon won't be much different. If I encounter a situation where I need to use the Godhead armament or pride, it'll be very bad. But it's not like I don't have a way to deal with it. Dake calmed down and thought carefully. He had basically considered all the things that he needed to consider. In the end, the super rare worm silver appeared in his mind. Knowing that he still had the strength to fight, he chose to go up to the next floor. It's 8 o'clock now. If I can complete the checkpoints on the 7th floor before 8:30, I'll consider it a success. After that, I just need to leave enough time to go to the lower floor to make up for the resource points. Dake patted his cheeks and opened the resource map. Using the map, he found the nearest staircase and quickly went up. This time, he was not unlucky enough to encounter a trap on the stairs. He successfully reached the 7th floor of the castle. When he reached the 7th floor, the number of students that he could see with the naked eye decreased. However, what surprised him was that the number of normal ghosts that he encountered on the way decreased as well. It was as if there was more than one person on the 7th floor clearing out these ghosts. Speaking of which, 7-star ghosts are worth 200 credits, 8-star ghosts are worth 300 credits, and 9-star ghosts are worth 400 credits. If I had the ability, I'd definitely join in the fight. This year's masquerade ball is a complete carnival. Dake sighed and only took a handful of candies in his hand. If he scattered these candies on the normal ghosts, they would temporarily lose the desire to attack. However, as Dake did not spend too much time clearing out the normal ghosts this year, he did not obtain many candies. He had to use them sparingly. As he was a second-year student, there were not many high-level resource points that were allocated to him on the resource map. There were only symbolic ones on the 8th and 9th floors. There were slightly more on the 7th floor, but it was still in the single digits. Therefore, his options were actually very limited. Following the guidance of the map, Dake unexpectedly quickly found the first resource point on the 7th floor, but there was someone inside. He glanced at the door and found that the person inside was actually the Evernight Baron Noah Sharp. Therefore, he could only roll his eyes and set off for the second resource point. After running for a long time, he felt a little tired. On the way, he encountered a few normal ghosts that were jointly killed by the magical spirits, which gave him some credits to express his gratification. Then, he finally found the location of the second resource point. However, this resource point had long been cleared out. You can't do the same thing more than 3 times. Dake took a deep breath and continued searching. At about 8:20 a.m., he finally found the third resource point in the familiar bathroom. Very fortunately, this resource point had not been conquered. Unfortunately, someone else had found this resource point at the same time as him. Therefore, once again, in front of the bathroom, he met a senior student. "You are Dake Dimming?" A 6th-year senior student who was wearing a school uniform at the masquerade ball curiously stared at his face. Dake observed the senior's uniform and said speechlessly, "It's me." "Senior, are you from the Aristocrat Academy? I don't think I've seen you in the common lounge before." "Of course you can't see me in the common lounge of the Aristocrat Academy." The senior tugged at the uniform of the Aristocrat Academy and smiled proudly. "After all, I'm from the Night Academy." Dake was indeed surprised, but he quickly asked with a fluke mentality, "Then, senior's grade?" The senior who was wearing the uniform of the 6th-year Aristocrat Academy smiled and said, "Of course, I'm a 6th-year student." "Dake, there are only 3 days left in October. Please, vote for me. If possible, vote for the minimum blade too. After this month's monthly vote and blade will expire." You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.